Chapter 372. The woman's eyes were red from the humiliation. She kept struggling and looked at the people around her for help. However, the people around her did not help her. Instead, they were watching the show. Some of them were even whispering. The patrol team of the capital city passed by. When they saw that it was Mad Devil's men, they left without stopping for a second. Mad Devil's men laughed wildly. The woman's beautiful eyes were filled with tears. Xiaoqing frowned. She did not expect Mad Devil's men to be so arrogant in the capital city. She also did not expect that people's hearts were so cold. Mad Devil's men molested a woman in front of so many people, but no onlookers helped her. Listening to their words, someone even said, "I asked her to pay the protection fee, but she didn't. I think she's just a slut. She's still hoping to be raped by others." Xiaoqing's eyes dropped to the freezing point. Finally, she took a step forward and quickly waved a vine. It wrapped around the woman's waist and pulled her into her arms. Xiaoqing withdrew the vine and hugged the woman in her arms. She covered her torn collar and said faintly, "It's not good to do this to a girl on the street." Mad Devil's man spat and said, "Who's the brave one who dares to meddle in my business?" Then he looked up and saw that it was Xiaoqing. He had seen Xiaoqing and also saw Xiaoqing beat up the masters of his regiment. His angry face suddenly turned into a warm smile. "I was wondering who it was. It's Captain Xiao. What can I do for you, Captain Xiao?" The onlookers were originally gloating over Xiaoqing's misfortune, waiting to see Xiaoqing suffer, but now their jaws dropped to the ground. Xiaoqing glanced at the man who was still being beaten and said, "Ask your men to stop first." The man smiled carelessly and waved his hand. "Okay, I'll give you face." "Stop, stop." When those people stopped, the man on the ground got up with a limp. He wiped the corner of his mouth and stood beside Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing patted the back of the woman in her arms, and then said faintly, "It's just a small matter. Why do you have to make such a fuss? It won't look good. Why don't we just call it quits? My face should still carry some weight. Since Captain Xiao has stepped in, then let's forget about this matter. Captain Xiao, if you're free, why don't you come visit our regiment? Our regiment commander still misses you," that person said with a smile. Xiaoqing faintly responded, "I'll go when I'm free." That person cupped his hands and left with his men. He was a decisive person. He knew that he couldn't win against Xiaoqing, so he might as well give face to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing wasn't going to give him face. Xiaoqing narrowed her eyes slightly. She was already considering whether to follow them later and see if she could kill them all. After Mad Demon's men left, Xiaoqing coldly glanced around and said, "Let's all go. Don't look at what you shouldn't look at. Otherwise, your eyeballs will run away." Those people saw that even Mad Demon's men didn't want to offend Xiaoqing, so they didn't dare to offend her. They immediately dispersed and did what they were supposed to do. Xiaoqing took off her coat and put it on the woman. Then she said faintly, "Okay, it's fine now. Let's go back." The woman clung to Xiaoqing's shoulder and wailed. Her towering breasts pressed against Xiaoqing's chest, making it difficult for her to breathe. She patted the woman's back and comforted her with great difficulty. The woman hugged her coat and thanked her softly. She was really grateful to Xiaoqing. If Xiaoqing hadn't spoken up for her, she might have been violated in public today. Chapter 373. It would be better for her to die immediately. Xiaoqing patted her shoulder and didn't say anything. Before she left, the woman insisted on giving Xiaoqing all the things in the stall. However, Xiaoqing didn't accept it. She had heard clearly that the woman had many orphans in her family. She guessed that she lived a hard life. How could she accept her things? However, the woman was very insistent and insisted on stuffing everything to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing had no choice but to accept it. Then, she stuffed a handful of crystal cores into the woman's hands and ran away while the woman was not paying attention. She knew that the woman wouldn't accept it, so she decided to run away. After she ran away with air dye, she put the things the woman gave her and the things she bought into the telepathic eye space. Then, she entered the city to find Mad Devil's group. However, Xiaoqing found that Mad Devil's group didn't leave after they entered the city. Instead, they hid in a corner and scattered. She wanted to find a place where no one could see them and stop them. Unexpectedly, they stopped. Xiaoqing had to hide with air dye to see what they were going to do. Xiaoqing and air dye waited in the dark for a while. Soon, they saw the woman and the man coming in. As the woman walked, she thought about what to buy for her children. Before the apocalypse, she was the caretaker of an orphanage. During the apocalypse, the children in the orphanage either died or went missing. In the end, only 6 or 7 of them were left, and she brought them to the capital. She and her brother were very caring and responsible. Every day, they went out early and came back late to earn crystal nuclei to feed the children. Fortunately, the children were very obedient and well-behaved. Every time she came back home, the children had already cleaned the house and were waiting for her. They went to the market first and bought some meat and vegetables at a reduced price. These vegetables weren't fresh, so they were much cheaper. After that, they turned left and right, preparing to go home. Because their house was in a remote place, they turned into a small alley. Mad Devil's group immediately followed them. Xiaoqing suddenly realized that they hadn't given up. It was good that they were fine. She was still thinking about how to find a place where no one could see and take care of all these scumbags. The woman and the man walked in front, while the mad demon people walked behind them. Xiaoqing and the others sat and waited for them to make their move. The more they walked, the more remote they became. Finally, they walked into a deserted alley with no one in sight. Xiaoqing was waiting for this moment. When Mad Devil's group rushed forward and tried to drag the woman away quickly, Xiaoqing and Air Dye attacked. Air Dye's nails were sharp. He quickly jumped into the crowd. With a slash of his finger, he could slit a person's throat. Xiaoqing also held a military knife. Then vines drilled out of the ground and tied people up. She held a knife and went up to kill people. Not to mention the captain of Mad Devil, even the woman and the man were stunned. Then, they watched their heads fall to the ground one by one. Blood gushed out from their necks and flowed to the ground in an instant, dyeing the ground red. Xiaoqing didn't even give them a chance to speak. She had already killed all of them. The captain of Mad Devil's group saw that the situation was not good. He wanted to run away, but Xiaoqing stretched out her hand and whipped his head. Xiaoqing was very fast. The man and the woman could only see the cold light flashing. In a few minutes, the ground was covered with corpses. After all, with her current strength, killing these few dregs was like cutting grass. If the grass was a little sharper, she might even be able to cut her fingers. However, this group of people couldn't even touch the corner of her clothes. Chapter 374. The woman was stunned. She probably didn't expect Mad Demon's men to tail them, nor did she expect Xiaoqing to keep an eye on this group of people. She stuttered for a long time before saying, "We're almost at my door. Do you want to come in and have a seat?" Xiaoqing wasn't prepared to go in, but seeing the woman's expectant eyes, she thought for a moment and nodded. Okay. The two followed the woman into her house. They weren't so poor that they had to live in tents. They could still afford to live in a bungalow, but it was a little cramped. As soon as the woman returned home, the group of children surrounded her and shouted. The woman touched their heads one by one and said, "These children are all orphans. They have no one to rely on. It's quite pitiful. Now we rely on each other." She asked the children to call Xiaoqing Aunt one by one. The group of children was very obedient. Xiaoqing touched the children's heads and felt very emotional. Looking at these children reminded her of when she was young. Then the woman bought some fruits and distributed them to the children. The fruits she bought were all artificially cultivated in the base. The leftover fruits either had scars or wilted. Anyway, they weren't easy to sell. The stall owner recognized her and sympathized with her, so he sold them to her at a cheap price. At this age, the children lacked vitamins and the like. Eating fruits often was good for their health. Therefore, she often bought some fruits when she went home. Even if they were cheap, the children were very happy. After the children received the fruits, they couldn't bear to eat them. They nibbled on them in small bites. After nibbling, they first licked their teeth and then licked the places where they had bitten. An apple could be eaten for a long time. The leader of the children looked slightly older than the others. He was expressionless as he stuffed the last apple to the woman. Then he whispered, "I don't like to eat this. You eat it." The woman didn't eat it. She just wiped it and stuffed it back to him. Her eyes were red. "Eat it. I've already eaten." Xiaoqing's heart ached when she saw this. It wasn't easy for her and her brother to take care of this group of children. They must have suffered a lot. Xiaoqing flipped through her space and didn't find anything suitable. She only found some candy for the little buns. She took out some and distributed them to the children. The children's eyes were filled with joy and longing, but none of them reached out to take it. They were all very well behaved. Xiaoqing could only say, "Take it and eat. Don't stand on ceremony." The children all looked at the woman. The woman had just been saved by Xiaoqing more than once. She hadn't even repaid her life-saving grace. How could she have the nerve to take Xiaoqing's things? Not to mention candy, which was already considered a rare child snack. She hurriedly refused, "We can't accept it. Benefactor, you should take it back and give it to the child." Xiaoqing said faintly, "I'm giving it to the children, not you. Why are you refusing? Come, take it. It's not much, just one piece per person." The woman could only say, "All right, take it. Why aren't you thanking Auntie?" The children were all very excited. They were reluctant to eat the candy and held it carefully. Xiaoqing sat for a while. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, she said, "I still have something to do. I'll leave first. If there's a chance in the future, I'll come to see you." "Benefactor, you're not staying for dinner." The woman bit her lower lip and said disappointedly, "My cooking skills are very good." Xiaoqing shook her head, "I still have something to do." Then, she left with air dye. When she left, the woman and the man took the children to send her off. After Xiaoqing left, the first thing she did was to dispose of the corpses. The corpses were too close to the woman's house. Today, outside the city, the woman had a conflict with Mad Demon's people. Xiaoqing was worried that Mad Demon's people would find out about her. So, she specially cleaned up the scene and destroyed the corpses. At least, she didn't want to implicate them. After leaving, Xiaoqing touched her chin and pondered. She had heard the Mad Demon's team leader say something. Originally, it was like this. Someone beside him suggested to fry the woman first and then kill her. However, he sneered and said, "She made me lose face. How can I let her die so easily? Aren't we lacking 2 test subjects? I'll just use her to make up the numbers." Could the test subjects here be related to the previous chemical weapons? Chapter 375. If it was really as she thought, Mad Demon would definitely be conducting live experiments behind the scenes. Perhaps that chemical weapon was just a byproduct of their experiments. Xiaoqing rubbed her chin, her gaze a little cold. She felt that there was definitely something fishy about this. However, no matter what kind of experiment it was, Mad Demon would definitely cover it up tightly and not let others find out. Without accurate evidence, the Mad Demons would never admit that they had done such a thing. What was the evidence? At the very least, she had to find the place where the Mad Demon mercenary group did this experiment and expose this place to the entire capital. After all, the Mad Demon mercenary group had a very deep foundation in the capital. Moreover, Wu Booping alone would definitely not dare to get involved in live experiments. There must be someone else behind him. This person was very likely to be a high-ranking official in the capital. At the very least, he was at the level of the Qin family. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to withstand it. If that was the case, then it would be troublesome. Xiaoqing did not stay outside for long. She went back with her air dye. After returning, she first put down the things she bought and let Yan Hanqing arrange them first. Then, she went to the Qin family alone. She found old Master Qin and chatted for a long time. When she left, both of their expressions were very heavy. Even when Xiaoqing went back to eat hot pot, she did not relax at all. This kind of heaviness remained until lunch break, when Yan Qiyu massaged her shoulders. Yan Qiyu also noticed that something was wrong with Xiaoqing, so she deliberately asked, "What's wrong with you today? Isn't it a happy thing to move to a new house?" Xiaoqing simply told Yan Qiyu about the matter and expressed her concerns. Yan Qiyu laughed at that time. Even if the sky collapses, there are still tall people to hold it up. Why are you so worried? If Mad Demon is really conducting live experiments behind the scenes, then at least the Qin family is the one who has to deal with Mad Demon, right? As long as this matter is exposed, Mad Demon will be hated by everyone. You don't have to bear it alone. Besides, even if there is some powerful person behind him, so what? No matter how powerful he is, can he be the enemy of the entire country? To put it bluntly, what do you care about? The worst-case scenario is that we have to leave this place. We have people and food, so we can find a quiet place where we won't be disturbed and live in seclusion for the rest of our lives, Yan Qiyu said half-jokingly. When the time comes, air dye and I will warm your bed. Isn't that great? Xiaoqing's originally worried mood was also disturbed by him. She immediately laughed and said, "You're right, I'm thinking too much. But can you take your hand away from my chest?" Yan Qiyu moved her hand away from Xiaoqing's chest and said calmly, "I just saw a strand of hair. I've already taken it off." Then, he was kicked off the bed by Xiaoqing. Air dye immediately occupied Xiaoqing's arms and acted cute. After being enlightened by Yan Qiyu, Xiaoqing naturally put those troublesome things behind her and focused on strengthening her ability. Now that she was at level 5, she could find another mutated plant to subdue. Currently, the mutated plants in her hands were vines, man-eating flowers, and dodder. Among them, the man-eating flowers were not very useful unless they were used to kill low-level zombies. The dodder was only suitable for dealing with humans. As for the auxiliary plant, it was more suitable for large-scale battles. Moreover, it could not be known. Once it was known, the enemy would be on guard and it would be useless. If she subdued another mutated plant, she would mainly consider the auxiliary plant, which could assist her teammates, or her own ability. Chapter 376. However, there was no need to rush. It all depended on fate. On the third day after moving into the new house, old Master Qin sent a message saying that nothing unusual had been found. He had sent people to monitor the higher-ups of Mad Devil, but they hadn't found anything related to human experiments. However, when collecting information, the Chin family had discovered that many ordinary people had gone missing. These missing people often didn't have any relatives or friends, didn't have high status, or lived alone. Therefore, after they went missing, no one would look for them. After a while, the existence of these people had faded away. After all, it was the end of the world, and human lives were the most worthless. It was normal for a few people to go missing. Perhaps some paranormal didn't like you and killed you, and you wouldn't be able to complain. However, more and more people went missing, and some people with relatives also went missing. Only then did someone report the case. However, even if the case was reported, it would become an unsolved case because no one could find the missing people. Old Master Chin felt that this matter was very strange. Where did all the missing people go? Even if there were a few people who offended some powerful paranormal and were killed, it was impossible for all the thousands of people to offend paranormal, right? Old Master Chin's intuition told him that this matter might be related to Mad Devil. Xiao Qing also felt that it was related to Mad Devil. After all, if they wanted to do human experiments, they must have test subjects. So, where did the test subjects come from? These people who lived alone and didn't have any relatives or friends were very likely to become the prey of Mad Devil. After all, even if they went missing or died, no one would do anything for them. After reading the message that Old Master Chin gave her, Xiao Qing didn't have any clue. She contacted Zhu Machun and prepared to go out with him. Zhu Machun and Wu Buping had been at odds for a long time, so maybe he knew something. As soon as Xiao Qing said that she wanted to go out, two people followed her. One was Yan Chiue, and the other was Dai. When they heard that Xiao Qing wanted to go out with a man, they automatically ignored the man's name and insisted on going out with her. Xiao Qing couldn't do anything about it, so when she went out, she brought 2 pieces of sticky candy with her. Zhu Machun had come by himself. They had arranged to meet at a small restaurant, so they could have a meal together. Then, when Zhu Machun arrived, he saw that Xiao Qing was standing on either side of him. There wasn't the slightest hint of a private conversation going on. Xiao Qing helplessly invited Zhu Machun to sit down and then handed him the menu. They didn't come out to eat, so Zhu Machun ordered 2 of his favorite dishes and then returned the menu. After the waiter left, Xiao Qing chatted with Zhu Machun about the things that had happened to her recently. However, she turned everything she had seen and heard into guesses. Then Xiao Qing said, "I called you out this time mainly to ask if you know anything about mad demons." Zhu Machun thought for a moment, then said, "Because of many reasons, mad demon and I don't like each other. You should know that. The more hostile we are, the more we try to understand each other. I was like that for a period of time. I carefully studied Mad Demon, but I didn't find anything wrong with him until recently." "Who?" Xiao Qing asked curiously. "Guan Haishan. You probably don't know this name. He represented one of Mad Demon's 3 vice commanders, but he died a long time ago. However, I saw him again a while ago," Zhu Machun said with a serious expression. "I felt that something was wrong at the time, but I didn't have time to verify that person's identity, so I couldn't confirm if he was really Guan Haishan." Chapter 377. When he said this, Xiao Qing also felt that something was wrong. She felt that there was something fishy about the appearance of a person who had already been declared dead. If Guan Haishan wasn't dead, then why did Mad Demon announce that Guan Haishan was dead? If Guan Haishan was dead, then the person who appeared now, who was it? After chatting with Zhu Machun, Xiao Qing felt that her head hurt even more. This matter was too complicated. Immediately after, Xiao Qing was attacked on her way home. Because she didn't consider that she would be attacked on the streets of Jingdu, she didn't take any precautions. It was Dai, who had sharp senses, who was the first to pounce on her. When Xiaoqing looked up, she saw that there was a bullet hole where she was originally standing. This meant that a sniper was secretly aiming at her. If it wasn't for air dye, she would have been seriously injured at the very least. As soon as she found the bullet hole, Xiaoqing immediately pulled Yan Qiue and Dumbo and leaped onto the wall. Based on the shape of the bullet hole, she could almost guess the position of the sniper in the dark. Therefore, the wall facing the sniper was the safest. This was the same principle as the darkness under the light. Xiaoqing stuck close to the wall. After a long time, she suddenly rolled forward, exposing herself to the sniper's muzzle. She was already prepared to dodge, but the bullet didn't come. Air Dai was like a dexterous monkey. She quickly found the sniper's original position based on the angle of the bullet hole and other principles. However, there was only a slender bullet shell left. Someone tried to kill Xiaoqing. This knowledge made the three of them feel a little heavy. Then, who wanted to kill Xiaoqing? The most likely person was undoubtedly Wu Buping. First of all, she had previously ruined Wu Buping's plan. Then, she had a conflict with Mad Demon's people at the city gate in public. Most importantly, the people who had a conflict with her never returned to Mad Demon. They couldn't be found even if they were alive or dead. In terms of hatred, the one who wanted her to die the most was undoubtedly Mad Demon. Maybe someone had locked onto her when she just went out. That was the reason for the assassination attempt of fleeing thousands of miles away after failing to hit the target. This assassination could be said to be all bark and no bite, but it made Xiaoqing instantly vigilant. If a person like Wu Buping wanted someone to die, he would definitely do anything. This assassination was definitely not the end. It was just the beginning. Xiaoqing was in danger. "Let's go back first," Xiaoqing said expressionlessly. The few of them quickly left the scene, but they did not encounter a second assassination along the way. They told Gu Panpan and the others about this matter, hoping that they would be more careful when they went out. After all, they didn't know if the person in the dark would target Gu Panpan and the others after the assassination failed. It's most likely the Mad Demon mercenary group. Xiaoqing held her chin and said calmly, "After all, we don't have many enemies. The only one who urgently wants my life is probably Mad Demon." Xiaoqing said faintly, "I've been thinking about whether I should participate in the investigation of Mad Demon. At present, it seems that Mad Demon is not ready to give up on me. Strike first and gain the upper hand." Yan Hanqing calmly thought for a long time before saying, "If it's really Mad Demon who did this to you, then it means that they have a guilty conscience. If they have a guilty conscience, it's easy to reveal flaws." Xiaoqing nodded and said, "What I mean is, when everyone goes out, it's best to be careful. Try not to go out alone. Otherwise, I'm really worried." The few of them nodded and promised that they would try their best to stay at home for the next few days and not go out. After telling her friends, Xiaoqing also brought the news to Old Master Qin, hoping that with Old Master Qin's identity, he could find out something. After that, Xiaoqing was not plotted against or assassinated again. The assassination that day was like a flash in the pan, or even not a flash in the pan. She could almost confirm that the person who did this was indeed Mad Demon. After all, not everyone had the ability to assassinate her on the streets of the capital. Xiaoqing felt that being so passive was not her style. After thinking for a long time, she decided to lure the snake out of its hole. If she didn't kill this snake, she would be on tenterhooks when she took her friends out to do missions. She was worried that someone would jump out at this time to assassinate her or her friends. This was too passive. It was completely disadvantageous for her and her friends. However, luring the snake out of its hole was also a skill. Although the Mad Demon mercenary group was very powerful and dared to assassinate her on the streets of the capital, they definitely couldn't do anything in the capital. Therefore, Xiaoqing decided that she would go and be the bait. Soon, old Master Qin provided her with a beautiful excuse to go out. Chapter 378. Old Master Qin had found some information about the Mad Devil Mercenary Group's secret experimental base. Although it was just a groundless accusation, it was just right to lure the snake out of its hole. In fact, at the very beginning, old Master Qin refused to let Xiaoqing go out and take risks. He always felt that it was best for a girl like Xiaoqing to stay at home safely. It was too dangerous to lure the snake out of its hole. However, how could Xiaoqing stay at home safely? She refused old Master Qin's kindness and only took 2 people with her, Yan Qiue and Dai. Originally, she didn't even plan to take Yan Qiue, but Yan Qiue insisted on following her. She couldn't do anything about it. The place they were going to this time wasn't too close to the capital. It was a base in the north of the capital. This base was very small, so small that it didn't even have a name. Occasionally, when people mentioned this base, they would say that there was a base in the north next to a forest. This base was so small, but it was such a small base that the Mad Devil Mercenary Group sent people there again and again. According to the information old Master Qin gave her, there would be people from the Mad Devil Mercenary Group going to that small base every week. Sometimes it was on the surface, sometimes it was a small mercenary group that belonged to the Mad Devil Mercenary Group secretly. In short, there would always be people from the Mad Devil Mercenary Group going to that base 3 to 5 times a month. Such a small base, without any special products or places that others would pay attention to, why would it attract people from the Mad Devil Mercenary Group over and over again? Therefore, this base most likely had a problem. Of course, the most important thing was to lure the snake out of its hole. After Xiaoqing left the capital, she took Yan Qiue and Dai to the small base leisurely. The itinerary wasn't urgent. In addition, she was worried that if they walked too fast, the people following them would be shaken off. Therefore, she treated this trip as a vacation. She walked slowly, looked at the beautiful scenery, rested wherever she went, and cooked wherever she went. It was so beautiful that it didn't seem like the end of the world. The people who were following behind were gritting their teeth. They had already sent a message to their superiors. They had already set up an inescapable net in front of them and were waiting for Xiaoqing. However, Xiaoqing was leisurely. She didn't look like she was in a hurry, nor did she look like she was going to investigate. She looked like she was simply traveling. At night, Xiaoqing and the others would set up their tents and look for wild animals and vegetables nearby. They would eat different kinds of food every day. Today they would eat barbecue, tomorrow they would eat hot pot, and the day after tomorrow they would eat several dishes with white rice. What about them? He dared not sleep at night, for fear that Xiaoqing and the others would disappear when he opened his eyes. While Xiaoqing and the others were eating delicacies, the few of them were gnawing on dry food. In fact, they used to eat hardtack and dry food that was hard enough to break their teeth. At that time, they didn't feel too bad and were used to eating it. However, when there was a comparison, there would be hurt. Especially when the fragrance of Xiaoqing's cooking drifted to the tip of their nose, the days of gnawing on dry food were particularly unbearable. The few of them couldn't wait to tear apart Xiaoqing and the others alive. If you have the ability to wander around, then leave quickly if you have the ability. If you have the ability to investigate, then do it properly if you have the ability to do so. Originally, the few of them thought that this job was very simple and easy. They bit on the dry food and almost cried. When they thought that they would have to live like this for a few days, they felt even more sad. Xiaoqing and the others' days could be said to be very happy. For example, this afternoon, Dai caught several pheasants back. They didn't encounter any other wild animals. Xiaoqing thought about it and prepared chicken soup with rice. Chapter 379. The rice wasn't the kind that was grown in the bases, but the old rice that was left behind before the apocalypse. After the apocalypse, some researchers developed a drug that could allow the rice to be cooked 4 times a year. Since then, most of the bases no longer lacked food. At least, there would not be more people starving to death because they did not have enough food to eat. It could be said that most of the bases had enough food and clothing. This kind of rice tasted slightly worse than the rice from peacetime. However, in the apocalypse, being able to fill one's stomach was already the greatest gift from the heavens. Who would care if the rice tasted worse? However, for someone as picky as Xiaoqing, they would definitely eat the old rice from before the apocalypse. When she went out to do missions, she would pay attention to food. As long as there was food, she would put it into her little treasury. Of course, she would eat the best food for her family. After the pheasants were cleaned, Xiaoqing put a lot of mushrooms and wood ears into their stomachs and cooked them in a pot. There was no need to put too much seasoning. Only a little oil and salt, and then a little star anise was enough. After the rice was out of the pot, chicken soup was poured over it. The mushrooms and the pheasant stomachs were taken out as side dishes. Every grain of rice was wrapped in sparkling soup. It looked very appetizing. Those who were hiding in the dark were biting their own hands. They were about to cry. They also wanted to eat rice, drink chicken soup, and eat chicken. They did not want to eat hardtack. Especially when they smelled the rich aroma, they felt like they were chewing wax. They could not swallow it. After the apocalypse, who would bring pots and pans when they go out? Who would cook rice and stew chicken soup when they eat in the wild? It was so torturous. Most importantly, not only did they have to endure this kind of abuse, they also had to watch the 3 of them being lovey-dovey every day. Their eyes were going blind. Especially that guy called Yan Qiue. If he did not act coquettishly once in 3 minutes, there would be something wrong with his head. Have you ever seen such a coquettish man? After enduring for 5 whole days, they really wanted to rebel. If it wasn't for the fact that victory was right in front of them, they really wanted to jump out and let Xiaoqing give them a quick death. The only thing that supported them now was that they were getting closer and closer to the trap they had set up. As long as Xiaoqing and the others stepped into the trap, they would no longer have to suffer this kind of torture. On the 6th day, Xiaoqing finally arrived at the nameless base, the forest outside. She heard that there was a pond in the forest, and the water here was not polluted. There were even live fish inside. Xiaoqing was not interested in the pond. She led the 2 into the forest. As long as they passed through the forest, they would reach the nameless base. When they arrived at the base, they could take a shower, change their clothes, and have a good sleep. Xiaoqing was looking forward to it. She bit her nails and thought about what to eat for dinner. On the surface, she looked very relaxed, but in fact, the moment she stepped into the forest, her whole person became vigilant. Her whole body's muscles were tensed up to a perfect state, ready to attack at any time. If something unexpected happened, such as an assassin from the sky, she could react in an instant. As Xiaoqing walked forward, she suddenly smelled a faint fragrance. That fragrance was very faint, very light, and very pleasant to the nose. It was just like her autumn flowers, making people unknowingly fall for it. Xiaoqing's sense of smell was very good. The key was that she and Dai would not fall for it because they were zombies. Most of the poison was transmitted through blood, and the blood of zombies was pitifully small. Chapter 380. Moreover, all poisons targeted the human body. Zombies were just walking corpses. How could they be afraid of poisons? However, Yan Qiue was different. He was a living person. Among the three of them, he was the only one who would be poisoned. While Yan Qiue was walking, he was suddenly stopped by Xiaoqing. Then, Xiaoqing kissed him. Without any warning, she kissed him. Yan Qiue was stunned. His heart was filled with joy like fireworks. It filled his brain and his heart. His blood flowed faster, like a torrent hitting a reef. Then, something was pushed into his mouth by the tip of her soft tongue. Yan Qiue was stunned. He silently swallowed the thing. It was the antidote he made. In order to seal it well, he sealed it in a candy-like shell and turned it into a colorful bowl. This time, it was Air Dai who almost went crazy. He screamed and pulled Xiaoqing. He looked at Xiaoqing with grievance. How could Xiaoqing kiss someone else? She didn't even kiss him. Xiaoqing felt guilty under his gaze. Even if she had a legitimate reason for her actions just now, she still felt guilty. In the end, she couldn't help but lean over and kiss Dumbo. After all, she should be fair. Air Dai was comforted. He held Xiaoqing's hand tightly. The people who were following them thought, "Fuck, it's too much. Let's go." Xiaoqing fed the antidote to Yan Qiue and heaved a sigh of relief. She continued to lead the two people deeper into the cave. The fragrance gradually faded. When the fragrance was almost faintly discernible, Xiaoqing stopped. "What's wrong?" Yan Qiue also stopped and asked in a low voice. Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She looked around and then picked up a thick branch. She poked the ground one step ahead. Then, the ground collapsed, the pit and the sharp blades at the bottom of the pit were exposed. Yan Qiue looked at the row of sharp blades and couldn't help but feel cold. The few of you are sneakily hiding in the dark and using such despicable methods. It is truly laughable. You dare to scheme against me, but don't tell me you don't dare to come out and see me. Xiaoqing coldly said. As soon as she finished speaking, a big net suddenly flew towards them. Xiaoqing hurriedly pulled Yan Qiue and Air Dai. The three of them rolled on the ground and went under the net. Dozens of paranormals came out from all over the place, forming an encirclement. The ones who acted faster were the long-range paranormals who were still hiding in the dark. Before the dozens of paranormals could get close to Xiaoqing, countless icicles, earth thorns, fireballs, wind blades, and water columns had already enveloped Xiaoqing and the others. Xiaoqing raised her hands. Vines weaved into a thick net, covering the three of them. No matter how fierce those paranormals were, they couldn't break the net and fall on their heads. At this time, the dozens of paranormals were close to them. One of the fastest paranormals had already rolled in front of Xiaoqing. He thrust two ice blades forward and stabbed toward Xiaoqing's stomach. Air Dai stretched out his foot and stepped on the man's hand easily. Then, he kicked the man's head off his neck with his other foot. No one knew how much strength Air Dai used, but he kicked the man's head off his neck. His head was almost torn off while he was still alive. Blood spurted out like a fountain and dyed Xiaoqing's trousers red. Xiaoqing's hand gesture changed, and the net of vines above her head instantly dispersed, turning into vines that spread out in all directions. Mad Demon had really put in a lot of effort this time. Among the paranormals who came to surround her, each of them was at least a level 3 paranormals, and a few of them had reached level 4. Don't forget that there were also those long-range paranormals hiding in the dark. Their strength was definitely not weaker than the 20 or so paranormals. Chapter 381. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to withstand such a lineup. Even those paranormals who thought they were the best paranormals in the country and the world wouldn't be able to survive if they fell into such an ambush. Just by looking at this lineup, it really felt like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. However, they weren't destined to be butcher's knife, and Xiaoqing wouldn't be the chicken waiting to be slaughtered. As soon as the ambushers rushed up, they found that Xiaoqing's vines were very scary. 3 of the weakest paranormals were pierced through by several vines. The vines shook lazily, and one of their corpses was torn apart and scattered on the ground. Those with higher levels could still fight, but don't forget that Xiaoqing wasn't alone. Yan Qiue and Air Dai were beside her. Air Dai reacted the fastest. He jumped up and didn't go far. He just stood beside Xiaoqing and harvested their heads under the cover of the vines. Yan Qiue was even more domineering. He stood still beside Xiaoqing like a mountain, his hands shaking as if he was conducting an orchestra. He waved his hands up and down, and from time to time, someone was squeezed into a meat patty by his ability to control the air. Those people looked at him. No. They had to get rid of Yan Qiue first, so that they could fight Xiaoqing head-on. Then, they found that they couldn't even get close to Xiaoqing. The octopus-like vines almost filled the space around Xiaoqing. Occasionally, there were 2 paranormals who escaped and broke through the blockade of the vines. Air Dai was responsible for harvesting their heads. They had lost several lives, but they hadn't even touched the hem of Xiaoqing's clothes. The situation is tense. Retreat! Someone shouted in the dark, and those paranormals who had suddenly appeared retreated like a tide. But would Xiaoqing let them go? What a joke! They wanted to assassinate her, so they came to kill her. But when they saw that they couldn't win, they ran away. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Stay here. Xiaoqing sneered. The vines in her hand were like living pythons, choosing people to devour. As long as they were targeted, they would not be able to escape. One of them was a level 4 wind elementalist. His speed was extremely fast, and when he couldn't avoid it, he could even glide for a short time. He thought he could escape, but a vine suddenly wrapped around his ankle. The vines only tugged at him, temporarily immobilizing him. This immobilizing time was only about a second. What could he do in a second? He was able to make Air Dai appear behind him and tear his body apart. As a level 4 paranormal, he shouldn't have been killed so easily, but he had lost his will to fight. All he could think about was how to escape, and he didn't consider that he was stronger than Air Dai. In addition, he thought that he had escaped from a hopeless situation and relaxed. Suddenly, he was killed by Air Dai, who was weaker than him. On the other side, Xiaoqing didn't plan to let anyone go. She pretended to be poisoned and said in a low voice, "Let them go." Then, her body swayed weakly. Air Dai and Yan Qiue immediately returned to her side. Yan Qiue's acting was the worst. He held his forehead and collapsed on Xiaoqing's body. "Ah! I'm a little dizzy." Xiaoqing couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She pretended to be, I'm poisoned. The poison is so strong, but I have to pretend that I'm not poisoned." That person didn't go far. After all, they still had the poison as their trump card. Seeing that Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue were really poisoned, those people became restless again. The leader waved his hand and stopped everyone from leaving. Then, he quietly brought his people back. He approached Xiaoqing and took a look. Xiaoqing's face was a little pale, and her body was a little swaying. She looked like she had been poisoned, but she was holding on and not letting herself show it. He was very surprised and didn't shout anymore. He immediately waved his hand. "Go. Here's the chance." Xiaoqing also waved her hand secretly. "Here's the chance. Don't let anyone escape." Chapter 382. After everyone entered Xiaoqing's attack range, Xiaoqing calmly clapped her hands. Countless vines drilled out of the ground. They were like bones walking in a graveyard. As long as it was a living person, they would quickly be entangled by the vines. The range was too large. Almost all of the assassins were within the range. The only one who was outside the range was scared stiff. Then, he was easily swallowed by the man-eating flower that drilled out from behind him. The man-eating flower was like a king patrolling his territory. It slowly moved among the people bound by the vines. Whenever it saw a prey, it would open its flower crown and swallow it. The flower was only so big, but after swallowing 6 or 7 people, it burped to show that it was full. Xiaoqing controlled the vines and quickly tightened them into the bodies of those people. There was also Yan Qiue on the side, who was responsible for the fish that escaped the net that almost broke free. After the poison was injected into those people's bodies through the thorns, it wouldn't be long before those living people became skin bags filled with countless liquids. The vines absorbed the liquids through the thorns. In the end, only a piece of useless human skin was left lying flat on the ground. This was a terrifying scene. If other people saw it, they would definitely be scared to the point of wetting their pants. However, Yan Qiue was so stimulated that he almost became aroused. He clung tightly to Xiaoqing's body and said as if he was dreaming, "Sometimes, I really want to be eaten by you and become one with you. Then, even if you don't like me, you won't be able to reject me." Xiaoqing smiled and showed 2 sharp canine teeth. "Get lost." He said it as if she had that kind of special hobby. Even if she was a zombie, she was a zombie that paid attention to her diet and health, okay? Only brainless beasts and those brainless zombies would eat people like humans, who looked good on the outside but emitted a rotten stench on the inside. Then, Xiaoqing cleaned up the scene. She didn't find anything that could prove the identity of these people. Shaking the man-eating flowers and vines, she took Yan Qiue and Dai to the entrance of the base. When they arrived at the entrance of the base, only Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue were left. Dai had already sneaked into the base. Although she was using the excuse of luring the snake out of its hole this time, she really came out to investigate. If she could find what she wanted, of course, it would be for the best. Mad Demon's men would definitely be keeping a close eye on her. The people in the base would also know in advance that she was coming. In that case, why not make her an existence like a target and attract everyone's attention? Then, let Dummy go in and investigate. As soon as Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue appeared at the gate of the base, the 2 guards who were lazily guarding the gate were so shocked that their eyeballs almost fell to the ground. They had already received the news that Xiaoqing had absolutely no chance to pass through the woods. However, not only did Xiaoqing come out, but she also appeared in front of them unscathed. How could they not be shocked and their eyeballs fell to the ground? However, they reacted quickly. One of them quickly turned around, probably running to report the news. The other one came up with a forced flattering expression, then said, "You 2 look very powerful superpowered people at first glance. May I know what business you have in our base?" Xiaoqing talked nonsense with a serious face. "We are here to travel." The corner of the man's mouth twitched. What's so good about traveling in this broken place? There were no mountains in front and no water behind, and it couldn't be any smaller. Why would normal people come here to travel? Chapter 383. Stop fooling around, okay? But he didn't dare to refute. After all, he felt guilty, so he said shamelessly, "Yes, we have beautiful scenery here. There are many tourists here, ha 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 ha." The more he laughed, the more dry he became. In the end, he stopped. He probably couldn't lie anymore. Xiaoqing asked very kindly, "Is there any procedure to enter your base?" "No," he said reflexively. After saying that, he felt that his reaction was not right. After all, how could he let people in without checking? So he quickly made up for it. You two are obviously powerful paranormals. If you are an ordinary person, you still need to be checked. You two don't need to. That's great. Xiaoqing smiled and led Yan Qiyu in. The moment Xiaoqing entered, the man leaned against the door frame. His legs were like noodles, and he was sweating profusely. Motherfucker. Motherfucker. It turns out that lying is so difficult. As soon as Xiaoqing led Yan Qiyu in, they saw a few people coming toward them. The leader was a young man. He looked very handsome, especially his eyes, which were smart and cunning. As soon as he saw Xiaoqing, he strode to greet them. Oh, such powerful paranormals coming to our base is really a great honor. Please come in. What are you two doing in our base? Xiaoqing continued to talk nonsense with a serious face. Traveling. Yan Qiyu immediately added, honeymoon. The young man was much more shrewd than the gatekeeper. His smile didn't change, and then he said enthusiastically, if it's a trip, then it's best. You two must stay for a few more days. I'll show you around and see our place. You two can also tell me about the changes in the capital. I haven't been there for almost half a year. Xiaoqing asked calmly, how do you know that we came from the capital? The young man was stunned for a moment, but he quickly reacted. He chuckled and said, powerful paranormals like you two, where else could you come from? Besides, coming from the south, there's an 80% to 90% chance that you'll have to pass through the capital, so I made a guess. Did I get it right? If you're right, there's no prize, Xiaoqing said expressionlessly. Even the shrewd young man couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed because of Xiaoqing's extremely cold and unoriginal joke. He laughed dryly and said, you're all my friends from afar. I'll treat you two to dinner tonight. You must come. Of course, the most important thing now is to arrange the accommodation for the two teams. Please follow me. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Guan Haishan. Xiaoqing's gaze instantly sharpened. Guan Haishan. The person that Zhu Mochin said had died many years ago. She couldn't help but take a closer look at Guan Haishan. He had delicate features and fair skin. If you ignored everything else and just looked at his appearance, he actually looked like a pretty boy. Thus, Xiaoqing silently reached out and touched Guan Haishan's face. It was as fair and tender as it looked, with a hint of warmth. He didn't look like a dead person, and he definitely didn't look like someone who had died many years ago. Yan Qiyu grabbed Xiaoqing's hand and said with a bitter expression, didn't you say that you only love me? Why are you touching him? Isn't it good to touch me? Xiaoqing continued to talk nonsense with a deadpan expression. There's a fly on his face. Guan Haishan was speechless. Then, Guan Haishan walked in with an expression that said, we're serious people. The accommodation that he arranged for Xiaoqing and Yan Qiyu was right next to his. It was the largest and most spacious place in the entire base aside from the base chief's residence. Chapter 384. Therefore, it was perfect to entertain the two guests. The main point was that he was the base chief. The dinner was on Guan Haishan, and it was quite sumptuous. During the banquet, Xiaoqing had been observing Guan Haishan. Was Guan Haishan really the legendary Guan Haishan who had been dead for a long time? If so, how did he come back to life? Or was he not dead at all? If not, why did he carry Guan Haishan's name? If not for the fact that they were still in someone else's territory, Xiaoqing would have dissected Guan Haishan to see what the hell he was. Although both sides had ulterior motives, the atmosphere of the meal was still harmonious. After the meal, Guan Haishan and Xiaoqing talked about all kinds of things, and Yan Qiyu was a little sleepy. Xiaoqing carried Yan Qiyu in a princess hug and said, my baby is sleepy. Let's talk another day. Then, she couldn't wait to get rid of Guan Haishan, this crazy chatterbox. Guan Haishan walked all the way to Xiao Qing's room and almost followed in. In the end, Xiao Qing slammed the door, and his nose was almost pinched off. When Xiao Qing closed the door, she said very impolitely, "I'm fine with talking about the scenery with you. Even if you want to hear me having sex with my baby, you want to hear it too." Guan Haishan, who was shut outside the door, rubbed his nose and walked back after a long time. After he returned to his room, he ordered his subordinates to carefully pay attention to Xiao Qing's room. If there were any problems, they would immediately report to him. As for eavesdropping, he wasn't stupid. He didn't think that Xiao Qing wouldn't notice if someone got so close. In fact, anyone who got close would be discovered by Xiao Qing. She had planted several thin vines in the corner of the door. They were not noticeable at all among the weeds. These vines were equivalent to her eyes and ears, helping her to observe the movements around her. Once someone got close or eavesdropped, Xiao Qing would notice. After the arrangement, Xiao Qing carried Yan Qiue into the room. Then, she saw that the quilt on the bed was bulging. When she lifted it, Dai was hugging a pillow and looking at Xiao Qing with wet eyes. "How's the investigation going?" Xiao Qing threw Yan Qiue on the bed and said in disgust, "Go take a shower first." Then, she began to change the bed sheets and quilt. God knows what kind of people had slept on this bed before. She wouldn't be at ease if she didn't change the bed sheets and blankets. After changing the bed sheets and quilts, Dai proudly lay down in the new quilt. He talked about what he saw today with gestures and the tacit understanding between the two of them. Dai walked around the entire base and found 2 places that were heavily guarded. However, because it was daytime and there were too many people, and Xiao Qing had just entered the city, the security was even tighter. Therefore, Dai could not sneak in to check carefully. He checked the other places, such as Guan Haishan's bedroom. He found something very strange in Guan Haishan's bedroom. It was a pot of fresh blood. Dai checked it. The blood was very fresh. It was definitely released today. As for other suspicious things, he did not find anything for the time being. He planned to go out again at night. Xiao Qing touched Dai's head and said, "Don't go out tonight. Guan Haishan's security will be very tight. Wait until tomorrow. Qiue and I will trick Guan Haishan into taking us out for a walk. That will be your best chance." Dai nodded obediently. Then, he curled his slender body into a ball in Xiao Qing's arms. He even saw Xiao Qing carrying Yan Qiue back. Not happy. Baby has emotions. Chapter 385. Dai was obviously a little taller than Xiao Qing, but when he curled himself into a ball and stuffed himself into Xiao Qing's arms, he didn't feel weird at all. It was very harmonious. Xiao Qing had no choice but to hug him tightly as if she was hugging a large bun. Yan Qiue came back from the shower and saw this scene. He also snorted, then crawled under the blanket and hugged Xiao Qing from behind. Xiao Qing was like the sandwich in a biscuit, the piece of meat in a rujiamo. But it felt good to have a cool embrace and a warm back. Xiao Qing didn't fall asleep immediately. She thought for a while and felt more and more suspicious. Why would there be a pot of fresh blood in Guan Haishan's room? Why would he need blood? Xiao Qing wasn't so anxious at first, but now she was anxious to know how Guan Haishan died. Was this Guan Haishan really the dead Guan Haishan? She thought for a long time. When the moon was high in the sky, Yan Qiue couldn't help but cover her eyes and let her sleep. Xiao Qing closed her eyes, and then the 3 of them fell asleep. The next morning, someone approached. Xiao Qing was awakened by the small vines planted at the door. She patted Erdi's butt and asked him to quickly put on his clothes and find a place to hide. Then she turned over and didn't plan to get up. Poor Erdi had no choice but to crawl out of the warm bed by himself and find a corner to hide. The person who came early in the morning was Guan Haishan. Xiaoqing saw him through the vines, but she stretched under the blanket and didn't have any desire to get up. It was so early, and she really didn't want to wake up. She wanted to sleep a little longer, especially when she was in his arms. Then Guan Haishan knocked on the door. Xiaoqing said lazily, "What's the matter? If you have something to say, come in. The door isn't closed. If you don't have anything to say, leave. I still want to sleep for a while." Then Guan Haishan pushed open the door and entered. He walked past the courtyard and through the hall. The moment he stuck his head out, he saw Xiaoqing lying under the blanket. Only her fair arms were still exposed. Yan Qiue was resting on Xiaoqing's arms with a languid expression. A word popped into Guan Haishan's mind: dog. Male. Female. This kind of adulterous couple who flaunted their affection every day should really be dragged out and burned to death. Xiaoqing didn't feel shy at all. She stretched her head and asked lazily, "What's the matter, Base Chief Guan?" Guan Haishan smiled and said, "Didn't I tell you last night during dinner that I was going to take you two out for a walk today? I felt like we were old friends at first sight and felt like we had known each other in our previous lives, so I couldn't wait to come and find you." Xiaoqing touched her chin and said, "Base Chief Guan, I also feel like we've known each other for a long time. I feel like I used to visit prostitutes in the nightclub before. Ahem, I met a handsome young man who looked like you." Guan Haishan's face darkened, but then returned to normal. He said with a smile, "Is that so?" Xiaoqing crossed her legs under the blanket and hugged Yan Qiue. She said with a reminiscing expression, "That handsome young man was quite handsome, but he looked like a silver spear wax, so he left a deep impression on me." Guan Haishan's face completely darkened. After a long while, he laughed and said, "It's not appropriate to keep chatting like this. I'll wait outside. After you two finish washing up, we'll go eat first, and then go out for a stroll." Then, he went out like a small whirlwind. Yan Qiue held back his laughter for a long time, then leaned his head on Xiaoqing's shoulder and laughed. After laughing for a long time, he said to Xiaoqing, "Your words were quite harsh." It was satisfying. Chapter 386. Okay, get up. Don't you see that people are waiting outside? Xiaoqing glanced at Yan Qiue, then got out of bed and changed into simple and convenient clothes. Maybe there would be a chance to make a move today. Yan Qiue also got up lazily. The two of them chatted and laughed leisurely. After brushing their teeth and washing their faces, they went out. Guan Haishan was very patient. He didn't seem to be impatient at all. He took Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue to eat in a gentlemanly manner. Breakfast was a kind of fruit, called breadfruit. When the fruit was hanging on the tree, it was green and remained the same color until it was ripe. The fruit was only the size of a fist. When it was cut open, it was full of starch. The hard shell of the fruit was peeled off and steamed in a pot, then it was ready to eat. The taste was not much different from bread. Guan Haishan introduced the specialty to Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue with a smile. He also took a breadfruit and broke it open. It was very similar to bread. He sighed, although the conditions in this post-apocalyptic world are difficult, there are many things that we couldn't eat before. Even the national level of protected animals have become food in people's mouths. It sounds like base leader Guan has a lot of experience in eating. Xiaoqing broke a breadfruit and took a bite, then handed the other half to Yan Qiue. She couldn't be blamed for being careful. It was just that the people around her were enemies. If she was careless, she would be fine. At worst, she could tear space and leave. But what about Yen Chiue? She had to think about Yen Chiue. That's natural. I don't care about anything else, but I like to eat. Guan Haishan smiled and said, I think the most delicious thing in the world is a baby's heart that has just reached 100 days old. It's cut into pieces, half-cooked, and then served with wine. No delicacy can compare to it. His eyebrows were full of smiles, looking gentle and elegant, but it made people feel cold all over. Xiaoqing felt that she was about to lose control of her murderous aura. As long as Guan Haishan dared to say one more word, she would dare to dig out his heart in front of everyone, see if it was black or red, then cut it into pieces and stuff it into his stomach. Guan Haishan seemed to have noticed Xiaoqing's surging murderous aura. He sighed and said, I was just joking. Why do you take it so seriously? If we're talking about delicacies, I have a few mutated white cranes here. I'll ask the chef to make some for you two to try. Then I'll be waiting. Xiaoqing said faintly. If Yen Chiue hadn't grabbed her wrist, she really wouldn't have been able to suppress it. Looking at Guan Haishan's faint smile, Xiaoqing was completely sure that he wasn't joking. Xiaoqing could almost imagine how he cut out the hearts of innocent babies one by one just to satisfy his appetite. Such a person, even if he wasn't a zombie, was more terrible than a zombie. Because he had already lost his mind, his heart, liver, and conscience, he was worse than a zombie. But now she couldn't make a move, because a greater evil was still hidden behind the scenes. She had to find the demonic mercenary group's experimental base and then pull out this malignant tumor. Guan Haishan was just a member of the demonic mercenary group. In the mercenary group, there were countless people who were as crazy as Guan Haishan. Looking at Xiaoqing's calm eyes, Guan Haishan was a little surprised, but he didn't say anything. He smiled and accompanied Xiaoqing and Yen Chiue to have breakfast, and then enthusiastically took them out for a walk. There weren't many people going out with them, only Guan Haishan and a few ability users with high levels. They should also have a relatively high status in the base. Chapter 387. The so-called going out for a walk was actually taking a walk around the area. After all, there wasn't much to see in this shabby place. The small forest was one of the places he took a walk around. It was the place where Xiaoqing had been ambushed. While walking in the forest, Guan Haishan casually asked Xiaoqing, "Did you encounter anything special on your way here?" "Base Leader Guan, what kind of special things do you think I would encounter?" Xiaoqing smiled and asked in a low voice. Guan Haishan laughed and said, "What I mean is, did you encounter any special mutated animals or something new? Tell me about it. I'm very curious." Xiaoqing nodded and said, "If that's the case, I actually encountered a group of ants right below your feet. They tried to bite an elephant to death, but the elephant felt itchy, so it stomped its feet and stomped the ants to death. Don't you think it's interesting?" Guan Haishan's eyes were cold. He sneered and said, "It's interesting. An ant wants to shake an elephant. It's overestimating itself. The only outcome of overestimating itself is to be crushed to ashes." Xiaoqing also had a smile on her face. "I can laugh at this joke for a year." Yen Chiue stood to the side, watching Xiaoqing and Guan Haishan exchange back and forth. In that instant, he seemed to sense a special energy fluctuation from Guan Haishan's body that flashed past. He glanced at Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing also felt it. There was definitely something wrong with Guan Haishan. The topic was quickly changed. Guan Haishan took Xiaoqing to see the pond in the forest. There were living fish in it. From time to time, they could see a fish floating to the surface and blowing bubbles. Guan Haishan said, "Originally, I wanted to move the pond and the fish to the base and raise them in front of my house. I would take some good things to raise them every day. If I want to, I can take one out to eat. Later, I found that these fish are fiercer than me. He raised his chin. Immediately, a paranormal came out from behind him and took out a live rabbit from his bag. He tied it with a string and hung it above the pond. The water's surface remained calm for about 2 minutes. Suddenly, several palm-sized fishes jumped out of the water. As soon as they jumped out of the water, the fishes suddenly opened their mouths, revealing a mouthful of sawtooth teeth. Then, they suddenly bit the rabbit. This bite was really fierce. The rabbit's stomach was torn open. It kept struggling and letting out pitiful cries. However, it was quickly eaten by the school of fish that jumped up. In the end, there was no trace of the rabbit's existence except for the blood on the water and the ripples that gradually calmed down. Is it fierce? Guan Haishan rubbed his chin and asked Xiao Qing with a smile. Xiao Qing's face was expressionless. She said indifferently, yes. At first, I thought that since it was so similar to me, I couldn't raise it. After all, 2 tigers can't live on the same mountain. Later, I found that they are still useful. For example, they can help me deal with some people I hate and some people I don't like. Guan Haishan's eyes flashed and he smiled very gently. The only thing that makes me angry is that they always don't listen to me. They are very greedy. I feed them, so not only do they eat, but they also learn to prey on passers-by. Naughty. The anger in Xiao Qing's heart rose again. The more she chatted with Guan Haishan, the more she couldn't suppress the anger in her heart. She really wanted to cut Guan Haishan into pieces and chop him into minced meat. How could there be such a crazy person in this world? No, Zhu Machan said that Guan Haishan was already dead. Then, it was uncertain whether the Guan Haishan in front of her was a human or a ghost. Chapter 388. Guan Haishan seemed to be in a good mood. He said lazily, I'm telling you this because I want to tell you that it's fortunate that you didn't catch some fish to try when you came. I'm not worried about you, I'm just worried that my babies would be slaughtered. She wanted to shove Guan Haishan into the water and let him feel how much his babies loved him. Xiao Qing, who was about to lose control of her anger, said calmly, I heard that the scenery around the base is beautiful. I don't think it's a big deal. Are there any other places that are more beautiful? What do you want to see? Why don't you tell me? Guan Haishan said innocently, if you don't tell me, how would I know what you want to see? Xiao Qing wanted to say that she wanted to see him die, but she didn't say it in the end. What she needed to do now was to be patient and wait for Dai to find evidence or something. She looked around and changed the topic. Why don't we go to the forest behind the base? It's more spacious there. I think there will be a lot of interesting things there. Maybe we can even catch some prey for lunch. Guan Haishan, who had always been sarcastic, was not sarcastic this time. He said seriously, you're a guest. I should try my best to fulfill your request, but I can't fulfill this request. Why? Xiao Qing asked calmly. Guan Haishan said, the forest was originally a barrier for our base. We could go in to pick mushrooms, wild vegetables, and catch mutated animals to fill our stomachs. I don't know if our actions angered some high-level mutated animals, so one day, there was a beast tied in the forest. They killed all our hunters in the forest. Since then, I've been sending people to guard the forest to prevent others from going in to die. I see. Xiao Qing nodded. Then let's go somewhere else to take a look. She said it calmly and casually, as if she really had no interest in the forest. In fact, she had ticked the forest in her heart. Although Guan Haishan acted normal and had a good reason, her intuition told her that there was something unusual in the forest. The more normal Guan Haishan was, the more abnormal he looked compared to his previous behavior. However, Xiao Qing wasn't stupid enough to enter the forest and arouse Guan Haishan's vigilance. The more suspicious she was, the more she wanted to keep a low profile and investigate in secret. After silently memorizing this point, Xiao Qing followed Guan Haishan to walk around. During this time, Guan Haishan repeatedly told her about his hobbies. For example, he liked to tie the legs of his opponents together with iron wires and banish them in the woods. Then, he would release some wild beasts that had been hungry for several days and watch those opponents run for their lives. In the end, because of excessive bleeding and lack of physical strength, they would be torn apart alive by the wild beasts. Those things were wonderful entertainment for him. When Guan Haishan talked about them, his face was filled with excitement and joy. Xiao Qing almost lost control of her anger and murderous intent several times. Fortunately, Yan Qiue was by her side. Whenever she was about to lose control, Yan Qiue would patiently rub her palm, passing comfort and gentleness through the warmth of her palm. Otherwise, Xiao Qing would have exploded long ago. Even so, when Xiao Qing returned to her room at noon, she was so angry that she almost wanted to tear the house down. Yan Qiue comforted her while raising her doubts. I feel that Guan Haishan seems to be deliberately provoking your anger. Chapter 389. Speaking of this, Xiao Qing couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Why does he want to provoke me? What good would it do him to provoke me? I can't figure it out. Yan Qiue also frowned and analyzed. Could it be that he wants to provoke you and make you ignore other details? So, this base should be hiding a secret. According to what you said, Xiao Qing thought for a while and said, could it be that forest? Both of them thought of that forest and Guan Haishan's completely different attitude when talking about the forest. My intuition tells me that this matter isn't that simple. Xiao Qing thought carefully for a long time and then said, when Dai comes back, ask him if he found anything. If he didn't find anything else, we have to go into the forest. Even if we know it's a trap, we have to go in. What's that saying again? The most dangerous place is the safest place. It's very likely that they think so too. Xiao Qing paced back and forth. After a while, she said, I have a feeling that the thing we are looking for is in that forest. Guan Haishan is not stupid, and he knows that we are not stupid. If this is not a trap, then it's best. If this is a trap, then he will use real bait to lure us in. So, no matter what, we have to check out that forest. Yan Qiue nodded. He understood Xiao Qing's mentality very well. This mentality was called invincibility. All conspiracies and tricks were nothing in the face of absolute strength. Therefore, Xiao Qing was not afraid of any traps or conspiracies. However, Yan Qiue was afraid. He was not afraid of death. In fact, he didn't care about death. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so careless about his own body. But he was afraid of Xiao Qing. Even if it was just an injury, he didn't want it to happen to Xiao Qing. At night, they went out to have dinner with Guan Haishan. This time, Guan Haishan was much more normal. He didn't deliberately provoke Xiao Qing and Yan Qiue. When she returned, Dai was already back. When he told Xiao Qing what had happened, Xiao Qing almost wanted to rush out and burn down the entire base. It was Yan Qiue and Dai who held onto her thighs and refused to let her go. This time, Dai infiltrated two heavily guarded places. The former was a grain storage, while the latter was also a grain storage. However, the latter's grain storage was only used by Guan Haishan alone. The people locked inside were all young girls and children. According to the caretaker, there were girls being bled every day. The blood that was drained was supplied to Guan Haishan. However, in order not to frequently go out to catch girls and be discovered by others, they would not kill these girls. Every time, they would only release the girls' bodies to the limit and then slowly nourish them. When they were almost nourished, they would then bleed them. And because Guan Haishan liked virgin blood, those people didn't dare to defile these girls. However, those children were pitiful. It was said that Guan Haishan liked to eat children's hearts. Of course, he wouldn't waste the rest of the children's bodies. He asked the chef to cut them into strips and air dry them. According to Guan Haishan, children's flesh was tender and had a unique fragrance. After air drying, it tasted very good. How can there be such a crazy person in this world? Xiao Qing let out a long breath. Her hands that were grabbing the bed sheet were covered with blue veins. If it weren't for the fact that she wanted to find the experimental base and save more people from suffering, if it weren't for the fact that she wanted to expose the mad demon's true colors and remove this malignant tumor, she really wanted to rush out and kill Guan Haishan and everyone in this base. Chapter 390. If Guan Haishan was a beast, then the people in the base were also murderers who helped the tyrant. Ah, Qing, don't be impulsive. Yan Qiue hugged her tightly. Let's wait until we finish exploring the forest. As long as we find the mad demon's experimental base and have evidence, we can completely destroy the mad demon mercenary group. Otherwise, even if you kill Guan Haishan and the people in this base, Lu Haishan and Chen Haishan will appear in the future. More people will suffer. It's not worth it. I know. Xiao Qing took a deep breath and said, as soon as we enter the forest, Guan Haishan will find out that we are not here. So, no matter what, we have to contact Old Master Qin first. Even if something happens to us, at least the news can be sent back. Air Dai, this task will be handed to you. Air Dai immediately shook his head and held Xiao Qing's hand tightly. He couldn't return to the capital alone when Xiao Qing was in the most danger. You haven't shown up, so it's best if you go back. Xiao Qing touched Air Dai's head. Don't be stubborn, okay? Air Dai didn't speak. He just held Xiao Qing tightly. After a while, Yan Qiue said, I'll go back. He was very calm. Even if he didn't want to abandon Xiao Qing in such a dangerous situation, someone had to do it. Besides, Air Dai was more suitable than him to stay. He would get injured, bleed, and lose his combat ability. If something happened, he might become a burden to Xiao Qing. However, Air Dai wouldn't. Although Air Dai was slightly weaker, he didn't feel pain, didn't know fatigue, and could recover quickly. In terms of combat ability, he was stronger than Yan Qiue. Yan Qiue knew that now was not the time to consider things based on emotions. In any case, the best person to stay was Air Dai. Xiao Qing patted him on the shoulder and joked, our safety depends on you. Yan Qiue stepped forward and hugged Xiao Qing tightly. Then, she said in a low voice, if anything happens to you, I will immediately end my life and go over to accompany you. I believe that Air Dai and the others will also make the same choice. So, take care of yourself. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as 2 lives. Xiao Qing's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled and said softly, I know, so we will definitely come back safely. Then, for the first time, Yan Qiue hugged Air Dai without any reservations and said, I can't stay by Ah Qing's side and face danger with her, so I'll leave the task of protecting Ah Qing to you. I trust you. Yan Qiue knew that in the face of fatal danger, Air Dai would definitely stand in front of Xiao Qing. Although the two of them were love rivals, the more rivals they were, the more they could understand each other. Although Air Dai couldn't speak, Yan Qiue knew very well what Air Dai wanted to say. As long as he was alive, he would not let Xiao Qing get hurt. If anyone wanted to hurt Xiao Qing, they would have to step over his dead body. Why do you make it sound like you're going to be separated forever? Xiao Qing wanted to liven up the atmosphere. We're just going to the forest to investigate. Maybe by the time you come over with your men, we'll already be walking back with Guan Haishan's head. Okay. Yan Qiuyao leaned forward and kissed Xiaoqing. I'll leave tonight. Be careful. Xiaoqing prepared some food and necessities for him and packed them. Then, she secretly sent Yan Qiuyao away. The next day, Guan Haishan came to look for Xiaoqing again. He knocked on the door. After a while, he heard Xiaoqing say, I won't go out today. My baby has chicken pox. Guan Haishan rolled his eyes and then asked, what kind of chicken pox? We have doctors in the base, but we won't let them come over. Chapter 391. He didn't believe it. A high-level paranormal who was fine yesterday suddenly had chickenpox today. Who was she kidding? Xiaoqing came over in her pajamas and opened the door. Then she said regretfully, although I would like to walk around again, my baby is very uncomfortable, so forget it. There's no need to see a doctor. She'll be fine after lying down for 2 days. Guan Haishan poked his head slightly and saw a person lying on the bed with her back to him. She was curled up into a ball and looked very uncomfortable. He immediately smiled and said, then I won't disturb you. I'll get someone to bring you lunch. Xiaoqing nodded and mercilessly shut Guan Haishan out of the door. As soon as Guan Haishan left, Dai got up from the bed and went out of the window first. Xiaoqing casually packed some snacks, then tore open the space and left casually. On the other side, as soon as Guan Haishan left, he ordered his subordinates to carefully observe Xiaoqing's residence. No matter what happened, they were to inform him. However, at this moment, Xiaoqing was already outside the base. She held a dried purple potato in her mouth and waited for a while before she met Dai. Then, the two of them went in the direction of the forest. Normally, this forest was next to the mountain, and there was such a legend. Usually, no one would come here. However, as soon as Xiaoqing and Dai entered the forest, they found a path that had been trampled by people. In other words, people often walked on this path. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared out of nowhere. Didn't a famous writer say that there was no path in this world, but when many people walked on it, it would naturally appear? Follow me. Xiaoqing pulled Dai and walked forward along the path. She was sure that when Guan Haishan found that they were gone, it would be at least lunchtime. More than 4 hours was enough for her to search the entire forest. Especially for people like her and Dai, who were extremely fast and were like fish in water in the forest, it was even easier. Xiaoqing took Dai and jumped directly from one tree to another. This way of traveling was much faster than running on the ground. As she jumped, she observed the traces on the ground. If there were people walking around often, it must be Guan Haishan's group. As long as they reached the end of the path, they might find what they were looking for. After about 2 hours, they entered the depths of the forest. The branches and leaves above their heads were so dense that they blocked the sunlight. And that was the end of the path. There were no more traces in front of them. However, the traces showed that there were only a few trees. There was nothing else at all. Could I have guessed wrongly? Xiaoqing frowned and thought carefully about whether she had missed anything. Did she miss something? But no matter how hard she thought, she couldn't think of anything. She walked back and forth and started to think from another perspective. If she wanted to build a base that she didn't want anyone to know about and wanted to hide it, where would she build it? For this base, the safest place around would be this forest. But there was clearly nothing else in this forest, could it be? Xiaoqing had a flash of inspiration. Underground. Once she thought about this, she suddenly realized that she had walked into a wrong place. Since Guan Haishan was a smart person, why did he suddenly behave so strangely when talking about the forest? It was as if he was deliberately leading her to think about the forest. The more Xiaoqing thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. Finally, she realized that she had really walked into a trap. A trap that she had fallen into from the moment she walked through the gate of the base. Chapter 392. The most dangerous place is also the safest place. What a good saying. What a good saying. Guan Haishan was indeed a cunning man. Let's go back. Xiaoqing grabbed air dye and prepared to go back. If she guessed correctly, Guan Haishan might even know that she and air dye were going to enter the forest. Just as they turned around and took 2 steps, Xiaoqing suddenly grabbed air dye's collar and rolled backward. A dagger was stuck in the place where she had been standing. Ha, I thought you would think about it for a while before you realized the problem. Guan Haishan squatted on a branch and said with a smile. It's not a loss to call you an old fox. Xiaoqing looked at Guan Haishan coldly. Since you have the guts to appear in front of me like this, it means that you have the confidence to kill me. Of course I do. It's just that I didn't expect you to be a 5th level paranormal already. Guan Haishan said regretfully. It must have been very difficult for you to come this far as a 5th level paranormal. It's just a pity that you can only go this far. Anyone can talk big, but if you don't have the ability to do so, I'm afraid you'll break your front teeth in the end. Xiaoqing said coldly. She seemed to be very confident, but in fact, she wasn't at all. Guan Haishan knew that she was a 5th level paranormal, but he still dared to appear in front of her alone. It fully showed that his strength was not lower than a 5th level paranormal. He was even confident that he could kill a 5th level paranormal. Whether I'm talking big or not, you'll know soon enough. Guan Haishan straightened up, and there was a gentle smile on his delicate face. Since we've known each other for so long and have a good chat, I'll give you a chance. Let's fight one-on-one. If you defeat me, you can even kill me. I won't call my companions over. On the contrary, if I defeat you, both of you will die. All right. Xiaoqing patted air dye's shoulder and gestured for him to stand aside and watch the fight. If Guan Haishan was really strong, then air dye wouldn't be able to help. Actually, Xiaoqing was a little annoyed. She had been through a lot, but she had failed miserably. She had been too complacent recently and had been too confident in her own strength. That was why she had fallen into a trap today. With her intelligence, she should have been able to tell that there was something wrong with Guan Haishan's words and deduced that it was a trap. She didn't have time to wallow in self-pity. She took a step forward and said indifferently, "Life and death is up to fate. Come. I'll let you make the first move," Guan Haishan said confidently as he leaped and landed in front of Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing wasn't the kind of person who cared too much about face. Since Guan Haishan was so confident and wanted her to make the first move, she would make the first move. Xiaoqing quickly condensed the superpower in her body. A vine whip appeared in her hand, and she whipped it towards Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan reached out and grabbed Xiaoqing. Don't tell me that a 5th level ability user like you can only do this. Xiaoqing frowned slightly. She found that the thorns on the vine couldn't pierce Guan Haishan's skin. With a thought, several vines broke out of the ground and stabbed at Guan Haishan's feet and thighs. Guan Haishan stomped his foot and leaped forward. Then, he grabbed 2 vines and tore them apart as if they were noodles. That's interesting. Xiaoqing observed Guan Haishan carefully. She kept releasing vines to harass Guan Haishan, but Guan Haishan didn't use his power. He only used his speed and physical strength to run around the vines. Chapter 393. Xiaoqing suddenly had a guess. She clapped her hands, and dozens of vines drilled out of the ground and surrounded Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan sneered and said, "Petty tricks." As soon as his voice faded, his expression changed. It was too late for him to change his action. Xiaoqing appeared in front of him out of thin air, her hands stabbing into his chest. Guan Haishan subconsciously reached out to block, but his hands and feet were entangled by the vines. He was able to get rid of the vines soon, but that short second was enough for Xiaoqing to put her hands into his chest. The moment her palm entered Guan Haishan's chest, Xiaoqing felt that something was wrong. Under normal circumstances, she would definitely be able to feel the warm texture of his skin wrapping around her palm, as well as the rapid flow of blood. But she didn't. It was as if she had stabbed into a piece of rotten meat. There was no warmth, and even the blood had dried up. Xiaoqing furrowed her brows and tore at both sides with her hands. Then, she tore open Guan Haishan's chest. There was a heart that looked fresh, but it wasn't beating. Under the fresh skin, there were muscles that had lost their vitality. Guan Haishan grabbed Xiaoqing's wrist and said with a smile, "Surprised? Scared? Or, surprised?" Xiaoqing broke away from his hand and quickly stepped back. Guan Haishan didn't stop her. He calmly closed his chest and patted it. Then, granulation grew out of the wound and quickly mended his chest. Soon, there was only an ugly scar on Guan Haishan's chest. It was impossible to tell that he had been injured. Guan Haishan touched the scar on his chest obsessively, then looked at Xiaoqing and said, "Do you see it? This is God's masterpiece. Only I have such a perfect body. Only I, and I am the closest to God." He said as if he was talking in a dream, "How could those stupid humans think that zombies are monsters? That is clearly a more successful evolution of human beings. A more successful evolution than superpowered people. Like me, I can't die. I am immortal. I am the spokesperson of God. You transformed yourself." Xiaoqing didn't know how to describe Guan Haishan anymore. She hated her body, hated the fact that she couldn't taste food, hated the fact that she couldn't feel happiness or pain, and was numb like a corpse. She hated her own rotten insides, and hated the fact that she was a burden to Guan Haishan, causing him to become like this. However, he did not expect that there would be someone who would be happy that he had turned into such a ghostly appearance. Guan Haishan was still smiling. "I think I should let you know the reason before you die. Yes, I died a long time ago. At that time, I was seriously injured and on the verge of death. After the leader asked for my opinion, he asked a few researchers to modify my body. They implanted a special zombie virus in me, causing my body to lose its ability to function. However, my brain retained a certain amount of activity. At that time, they thought the experiment had failed because I didn't wake up. However, I didn't die completely until 2 months ago." Guan Haishan sneered, "The demonic frenzy mercenary group has long noticed you. Do you know why? Those researchers from the south didn't come to join the research institute, but to join us. However, they are all dead. That old man died in your hands, right?" "Yes." Xiaoqing decisively admitted it. She looked Guan Haishan up and down and said after a long while, "Do you think you can defeat me because of your strong recovery ability?" Guan Haishan opened his arms and said arrogantly, "Isn't that enough? You can't kill me, so I can only kill you." Chapter 394. Xiaoqing smiled. She put away her vines and walked towards Guan Haishan step by step. A frog at the bottom of a well. She didn't seem to be walking fast. Step by step, she looked like she was taking a leisurely stroll. However, she soon appeared in front of Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan was also very fast. His black and shiny nails moved as he approached Xiaoqing. As soon as he got close, Xiaoqing grabbed his shoulder and punched Guan Haishan in the face. This time, Guan Haishan was stunned. Xiaoqing didn't seem to be moving fast, but before he could react, her fist had already landed on his face. Xiaoqing was very strong. Guan Haishan's neck made a groaning sound with difficulty. Then, with a crack, it broke. Then, Xiaoqing kicked Guan Haishan's chest hard, sending him flying. If it weren't for a tree blocking him, he might have flown dozens of meters. Guan Haishan fell to the ground like a broken rag doll, his head drooping like a broken rag doll. He reached out his hand, and with a crack, he straightened his head. Then, he rubbed his chest and got up again. I told you, these attacks are useless against me. Is that so? Xiaoqing suddenly took a step forward and appeared in front of him again. She didn't give him a chance to fight back at all. She beat him up fiercely. In the end, Guan Haishan was beaten up. He looked like a doll that had been sewn and mended many times and then thrown away. Xiaoqing stepped on his head and said coldly, even if you have a strong recovery ability, so what? You don't even have a chance to fight back. Ah! Guan Haishan reached out and grabbed Xiaoqing's ankle. Suddenly, as though he had no bones, he slipped behind Xiaoqing and hugged Xiaoqing. Then, countless bone spurs drilled out from his chest and stabbed toward Xiaoqing. At this time, it was too late to tear space. However, Xiaoqing didn't panic. She allowed the bone spurs to pierce into her body. Then, she grabbed Guan Haishan's arms and twisted them like fried dough twists. This time, it was Guan Haishan's turn to be shocked. He didn't care that his arms had become fried dough twists. He quickly retreated and said, "No. No." His bone spurs were produced after his body mutated. After piercing into a human, they could suck their opponent's blood. But just now, after his bone spurs pierced Xiaoqing's body, they didn't suck a single drop of blood. While Guan Haishan was still in shock, Xiaoqing quickly stepped forward and grabbed his left hand. Her nails pierced into his flesh, and then she directly tore his arm off. Guan Haishan stepped back in a panic, not caring about that arm anymore. He dared to challenge Xiaoqing, a 5th-level superpower possessor, because he had an immortal body. He couldn't die anyway. Then, he found that Xiaoqing didn't seem to be right either. Xiaoqing loosened her muscles and threw away the arm. Then, she said lazily, "Baby, stop him." Apart from Guan Haishan's special body, his strength was just that of a 4th-level superpower possessor. He couldn't withstand a single blow. Dai jumped down from the tree and stabbed her sharp nails into Guan Haishan's skull. Guan Haishan rolled on the ground in a sorry state. He was no longer as complacent as he was before. While dodging, he said reluctantly, "No. Impossible. You are a superpower possessor. How could you?" Xiaoqing looked at him with pity. "Immortal body, huh? You are really short-sighted. I'd rather not have such an immortal body. You." Guan Haishan dodged Dai's attack and said hurriedly, "Since you are not a living person, then we are the same. We are the same kind. Why don't you stand on my side? Do you want power? Or wealth? Or beauty? I can give you both." Chapter 395. Xiaoqing looked at Guan Haishan coldly. After he finished, she sneered, "Who is the same kind as you? Don't dirty my eyes." Guan Haishan said anxiously while rolling on the ground, "For those ants, you drew your sword against your own kind. What's the point? Once they know you're a zombie, they won't care about what you've done for them. Why bother? Say it again. Who is the same kind as you?" Xiaoqing said with disgust, "My father and mother are both human beings. At least I know what I am. At least I won't eat living people without conscience." She wanted to let Dai practice. Maybe he could take the opportunity to break through, but Guan Haishan was too disgusting. She couldn't help but make a move. She fixed Guan Haishan with her vines, then Dai directly stabbed his fingernails into Guan Haishan's skull. In the next second, Xiaoqing waved her hand. A black space crack tore Guan Haishan into pieces. Guan Haishan didn't resist until he died. He opened his eyes wide and murmured, "I don't want to die." Xiaoqing didn't pity him at all. When he wantonly took the lives of those children, did he ever consider that they didn't want to die either? Dai opened Guan Haishan's skull. It found that Guan Haishan's crystal nuclei were all black. It curled its lips and threw them away. Dirty. After making sure that Guan Haishan was completely dead, Xiaoqing destroyed his body. Then, she took Dai back. Since the experimental base wasn't in the forest, then her idea was probably correct. Xiaoqing took out some water and washed Dai's fingers carefully. Then, she took Dai's hand and walked back. On the way back, Xiaoqing ran into the ambush left by Guan Haishan, a group of superpowered people between level 3 and 4. They were all left in the forest forever. She estimated that in a few years, the trees here would grow even more luxuriantly. After all, she had fertilized this tree well today. After dealing with the group of paranormals, Xiaoqing and Dai returned to the base. They didn't alert anyone and quietly appeared in the base, then went to Guan Haishan's place. Guan Haishan's residence was very big. It was like a small manor. There were many flowers and plants in the courtyard. It looked very interesting. Guan Haishan's temper was unpredictable. There was no one in his courtyard. Xiaoqing and Dai walked around and entered Guan Haishan's bedroom. Sure enough, there was a pot of fresh blood on his table. He probably relied on this thing to maintain the vitality of his skin. Other than that, there was nothing suspicious. Xiaoqing thought for a while and decided to check the other rooms. After walking around Guan Haishan's entire residence, Xiaoqing found something wrong. There was a study room where Guan Haishan lived. There were 2 rows of bookshelves in the study room. The bookshelves were filled with books that looked very profound. Xiaoqing randomly picked 2 books. They were all very new. Not to mention reading notes, they didn't even have any traces of being flipped through. Guan Haishan didn't like reading. If he didn't like reading, why would he specially build a study room and put 2 big shelves of books? It couldn't be because he wanted to show off, right? In such a remote base, who would he show off to? So, there must be something wrong with this study room. Xiaoqing touched her chin and began to look around. She and Dai looked around. In the end, Xiaoqing found something behind the bookshelves. She suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She probably watched too many TV dramas. Her mind was full of traps, and she felt that the trap must be behind the bookshelves. Damn retard. Chapter 396. The wall behind the bookshelf looked normal, but if one looked closely, they would find that there were fine lines on the wall. The lines were in the shape of a rectangular door. If an ordinary person came in, they would definitely look for the bookshelf. After all, the bookshelf looked the most problematic, so they would overlook the more obvious wall. In fact, the person who set up this trap was quite smart. Xiaoqing pushed the bookshelf away and began to study the wall carefully. While she was studying, a crack suddenly appeared on the wall, and a door slowly opened. She could hear people chatting inside. Master Guan should be back soon, right? It shouldn't take long to deal with those 2 people. Is the virgin blood from Master Guan ready? Hurry up and supervise him. If Master Guan doesn't have fresh virgin blood to drink when he comes back, he will definitely lose his temper. Then, two people came out. As soon as they came out, they were stunned because two people who shouldn't be here suddenly appeared in front of them. Xiaoqing and Dai were also stunned. They hadn't found a way to open the door yet, but someone had opened it for them. You. One of them was about to speak, but Dai covered his mouth. Xiaoqing didn't dare to let them make a sound. She quickly stepped forward and subdued the other person. Their abilities weren't high, so it was easy for them to subdue them. Xiaoqing covered the other person's mouth and dragged him to a corner. She asked in a low voice, "Is this the Mad Devil Mercenary Group's experimental base?" The person's eyes were filled with fear, but he kept his mouth shut and didn't say anything. Xiaoqing smiled and looked very gentle. "You don't dare to say it. I'll give you two choices. Either you say it now, and I'll give you a quick death. Or you don't say it now, and I'll torture you to death." The person seemed to think of something, but he still kept his mouth shut and shook his head. Xiaoqing did not expect to be able to pry it out so easily. After all, the Mad Devil must be very tight-lipped. Therefore, she signaled for Dai to bring the other person over. Then, she used a vine instead of a palm to strangle the person's mouth to prevent him from making a sound. "I'm actually quite a gentle person, but that's only limited to humans. When I'm facing animals, I'm not so kind," Xiaoqing said coldly. She used the military knife to open a small wound on the man's neck, the kind that only drops of blood would seep out. Then, he stuffed some daughter seeds into it. Under her control, the daughter snuck into the man's skin and sprouted under his skin and above his muscles. Then, small bumps could be seen on his skin. They were very clear. These small bumps grew bigger and bigger, and soon, they burst open, revealing the tender green buds underneath. It wasn't just pain. There was also a bone-deep itch, as well as an indescribable fear. After all, anyone who saw grass growing on their body would be dominated by this sense of fear. He was in so much pain that he wanted to scream and go crazy, but he couldn't make a sound. He could only bite the vine in his mouth, and then the thorns on the vine pierced his lips and tongue. "He won't die." Xiaoqing looked at the other person and smiled. "All the seeds have taken root under his skin and can't extend to his internal organs, so he won't die. Say, if I throw him into a dark corner and let those cute little buds grow in his body, he won't be able to scream or move. He can only lie in that dark corner and feel those little cuties grow happily under his skin until he starves to death or is sucked dry by those little cuties. Then, when he's discovered, he'll be like a living potted plant. Doesn't that sound interesting?" Chapter 397. The remaining person was trembling. If not for Dai holding him up, he would probably have knelt on the ground. Xiaoqing patted his face and chuckled. "I'll know whether or not it's a laboratory once I go in. Why do I need to ask you?" He looked at his companion, and after a while, he rolled his eyes. A foul stench came from his body. Xiaoqing looked down and saw that his legs were gradually stained with water, and then there was a yellow liquid dripping down. He was so scared that he peed himself. Xiaoqing took a step back in disgust and kicked the person on the ground to a corner. Let him fend for himself. The remaining person kept making a pitiful nasal sound. Xiaoqing whispered, "What do you want to say to me?" Dai let go of his mouth and quickly said, "This is indeed the experimental base of the demonic mercenary group. There are many forks in the road, and many of them lead to traps. I'll bring you in." "Very good." Xiaoqing liked his understanding of the situation. She immediately asked Dai to take him to a corner and take off his pants. She even used the clean fabric of his pants to wipe a certain unspeakable part of his body. In the end, Dai threw away the dirty pants and threw him a pair of underwear. Then, Xiaoqing said, "Lead the way." The captive who was holding a pair of underwear was speechless. Xiaoqing kicked his butt. "Hurry up and lead the way." He obediently put on his underwear and led the way with his hairy legs bare. Before leading the way, Xiaoqing cut his wrist and planted 2 dots in it. Then, she made things very clear. "Lead the way obediently, and I'll give you a quick death. If you play any tricks, I'll make you wish you were dead." The captive originally had some tricks in his mind, but now, he was completely obedient. He led the way through the door. After the 3 of them went in, the door behind them slowly closed. There were lights on both sides of the wall. The light was very soft, and the eyes were not closed. The 3 of them began to walk in unhurriedly. After walking for a long time, they reached the first fork in the road. The leader said honestly, "Of these 2 roads, one is the right one, leading to the laboratory. The other is a dead end, leading to a trap. Follow me." Then, he led Xiaoqing and the others to the left side of the road. Along the way, they encountered a total of 6 forks. There were also many places with traps. If they took the wrong path, they would trigger the traps. When Xiaoqing walked forward, she calculated the direction and distance. When they reached the last intersection and got on the elevator, Xiaoqing suddenly realized that although they were underground, they had already left the base. If her calculations were correct, they should be in that small forest, which was also near the pond. Of course, it was underground. Guan Haishan was really astute. On the first day, he led them to the pond. Xiaoqing did not suspect anything else. No wonder it was said that the most dangerous place was the safest place. The ancients really did not lie. When they came out of the elevator, Xiaoqing found that the space was very spacious. There were lights on the ceiling, illuminating the entire underground space as if it was daytime. There were many people wearing white coats and masks walking around. Other than the middle passage, there were rows of rooms on both sides. Some of the rooms had their doors open, while others had their doors closed. Once they came down, Xiaoqing followed the agreement and gave the captive a quick death. Then, she threw the corpse in a corner and sneaked into the laboratory. The way to sneak in was to kill 2 researchers, change into a white coat, put on a mask, and look around from afar. Chapter 398. The more she looked, the angrier Xiaoqing became. Some rooms were filled with test subjects in transparent glass containers filled with strange liquids, and the test subjects were in the liquids. She saw test subjects whose lower bodies had been cut off and replaced with animal tails. She also saw superpowered people who had turned into zombies. There were also babies curled up in their disemboweled stomachs and their mothers. Those test subjects had failed and hadn't been destroyed, or they still had some value, so they were all displayed in the rooms. There were also living people in the rooms. They were all wearing the same uniform like patients, and each of them had a serial number on their chest. Those were the people who were about to become test subjects. Xiaoqing walked into many rooms, and her heart was burning with anger. The most terrible thing was that in one of the rooms, such an experiment was still being carried out. Living people were locked in a sealed room, and then the chemical weapons they had developed were thrown into the room. Xiaoqing saw with her own eyes that several people gradually turned into zombies in the poisonous fog, and finally turned into terrifying monsters that looked like zombies but also a little bit like animals. However, this kind of chemical poisonous fog didn't seem to have been completely developed, because those who had turned into monsters were all dead. She couldn't suppress her anger anymore, and her long nails were already reaching out. At that moment, a man in a white coat hurried over and grabbed Xiaoqing. "Where did you 2 go? The experiment is at the most critical moment, why are you running around?" Then Xiaoqing was dragged away, and Dai hurriedly followed. The two of them arrived at a room that was twice as big as the other rooms. There were many white coats in the room, and many things were placed on both sides of the room. There were all kinds of drugs and cold tools. In the middle of the room, there was a table that looked like an operation table, and a woman was tied to the table. The woman's belly was bulging, and it seemed that she had been pregnant for 7 or 8 months. At that moment, several people in white coats were surrounding the woman, as if they were doing a cesarean section. One of them said, "The mother's condition is normal, the transformation is not complete, and the life signs are gradually decreasing." Another person was taking notes in a small notebook. "Next, we'll start injecting SX93, another person in a white coat who looked like the leader said. Immediately, someone came over with a syringe. The syringe was filled with green liquid, and he shot it all into the pregnant woman's neck. After about a minute or two, the unconscious pregnant woman on the stage suddenly screamed. Blue veins appeared on her face, neck, and body. Her eyes were wide open, and her facial features were somewhat distorted. After screaming for a few seconds, he stopped breathing. The leader hurriedly said, "Quick! Take out test subject number 1398. The rest of the people hurriedly cut open the pregnant woman's stomach. However, as soon as they cut open the pregnant woman's stomach, a small white and tender hand reached out from the pregnant woman's stomach. Quite a few people were a little surprised, but they had seen the world, so they let down their guard. The next second, a wet baby came out. The baby came out with its eyes open, and it looked slightly bigger than a normal baby. More importantly, it had a very strange smile on its face. As soon as it came out, it pounced on the face of a man in a white coat like lightning. Then, there was a series of screams, because it gnawed the man's face alive. Soon, several high-level paranormals rushed in and quickly caught the strange baby. However, the man in the white coat had been gnawed beyond recognition, and black liquid kept dripping from his wound. Chapter 399. The leader expressionlessly took out a gun from his arms and ended the life of the man in the white coat. The leader waved his hand and said, "Keep the number 1398 test subject for the time being. This is the only semi-successful test subject we have after the number 068 test subject. Take good care of it. There must be no problems." Xiao Qing's eyes were cold. She quietly took out her mobile phone and took a lot of photos to save them. Then, she left the laboratory and began to look for the power control room. She wanted to destroy this place. This dirty, hell-like place. As for those poor test subjects, she could no longer save them because she found that all the test subjects had been injected with mutated drugs. They were no longer human. Instead of letting them watch in pain as they turned into monsters, it was better to let them disappear with this evil place. However, Xiao Qing was not ready to completely destroy this place, because this was also a piece of evidence. She wanted the whole world to see the disgusting face of the demonic mercenary group. Xiao Qing sneaked into the power control room with Air Dai. She touched Air Dai's head and asked gently, "Are you afraid?" Air Dai shook his head seriously. Xiao Qing smiled and took out a lighter. She calmly found a barrel of oil and poured it all on the surrounding machines. Then, she ignited it. After that, she pulled Air Dai and rushed out quickly. She found a corner, and then vines stretched out layer by layer, tightly wrapping her and Air Dai in the middle. Layer by layer, layer by layer. There was no gap between her and Air Dai. The man's body and the woman's body were perfectly attached to each other. When the vines turned into a big ball, a terrible explosion suddenly sounded. At that moment, Xiao Qing felt that she had lost her hearing. Her head was buzzing and blank. Even with the protection of the layers of vines, her chest was still hurt by the shock wave. After a long time, Xiao Qing felt better. This meant that she could hear. Xiaoqing removed the vines and found that her poor vines had been blown to pieces. At least 1 meter of the 2-meter thick wall of vines was completely broken. Of course, this did not show how terrible the explosion was. What was more terrible was that she saw the sun. The laboratory was originally underground, but this time, the explosion forcibly blasted through the soil layer above, exposing the entire base to the sunlight. Xiaoqing walked in the laboratory expressionlessly. If she met a man in a white coat who was not dead, she would kill him. If she met a poor test subject who had mutated, she would kill him. After she and Dai searched, there were no other living people in the laboratory except for them. At this time, the people in the base should have heard the noise and were rushing here. Xiaoqing calmly shot out vines and used them as ropes to pull her and Dai out. As they crawled out, Xiaoqing said seriously, "Don't leave anyone alive, understand?" Dai nodded seriously. After they crawled out of the pit, many people appeared in front of them. They were all from the base. Their jaws almost hit the ground. Everyone looked at Xiaoqing with disbelief and fear. Then, the massacre came. 2 killing machines that did not feel pain and did not know fatigue rushed into the crowd. They were like 2 lions rushing into a flock of sheep. It was a one-sided massacre. No one could resist at all. At most, they would struggle a few times before they turned into corpses on the ground spurting blood. Xiaoqing took Dummy with her and killed all the way into the base. She hated those crazy beasts in the base. She couldn't wait to cut them all up and feed them to the dogs. Oh, the dogs would definitely not eat them. At first, a group of people surrounded Xiaoqing and Dai. Later, they were scared out of their wits and were chased by Xiaoqing and Dai. She took Dai and killed them all the way. Wherever they went, the ground was soaked with blood. Especially after they entered the base, the square where the battle took place. Blood soaked the soles of their shoes. None of the paranormals in the base could escape. Even if there were 1 or 2 paranormals who ran away, Xiaoqing tore space to chase after them and killed them. Xiaoqing really hated this group of people. She even used the cruelest way to kill them. She dismembered them, crushed them or swallowed them by the man-eating flowers. Even so, it still could not alleviate her hatred for them. Especially after seeing the soul-stirring scenes in the laboratory, she couldn't bear to let this group of people die. She really wanted to torture them, make them wish they were dead, and make them unable to get up even if they wanted to. After killing all the paranormals in the base, Xiaoqing and Dai searched several times and found a few people who were hiding. Finally, they found the place where those poor people were locked up. There were only a few girls. As for the children, there were only 2 left. They were lying on the chopping board in the kitchen with their stomachs cut open. For this reason, she specially treated the 2 chefs well. She didn't do anything but cut the meat off their bodies piece by piece and stuffed it into their mouths. In order to give them the best treatment, Xiaoqing specially dipped some soy sauce. Look, she was so kind. As soon as Yan Qiue returned to the capital, she immediately contacted Old Master Qin. Old Master Qin didn't say anything. He directly mobilized the army and took control of the entire Mad Devil mercenary group. At the same time, he led the strongest paranormals of the Qin family and quickly rushed to the nameless base. They didn't rush there like Xiaoqing and the others. It was as if they were traveling. They could travel for 3 days in a day. They rushed there in a hurry. When the group of people rushed there, they saw Xiaoqing, Dai, and a few pale and weak girls sitting in front of a big pit. The strong smell of blood was already a little stinky. Chapter 400. The thick smell of blood came from the pit and the entrance of the base not far away. 2 rows of corpses were neatly stacked at the entrance of the base. Beside them were some broken limbs that couldn't be pieced together to form a complete corpse. The scene looked like hell. The flying flies landed on the corpses, densely packed. Even the ability users who were used to seeing all kinds of cruel scenes since the apocalypse couldn't help but feel a little nauseous. So when they saw Xiaoqing and the others, their gazes were a little strange. Xiaoqing didn't care. She stood up and greeted Old Master Qin, then said, "This is the private laboratory of the demonic mercenary group. Although it was blown up quite badly, most of the evidence is still here." As soon as she said that, those people pricked up their ears. Xiaoqing took the lead and led them to the laboratory that had already been blown open. They looked at the failed test subjects that had not been completely destroyed, as well as the experimental records that Xiaoqing had left behind in advance. Those people who originally looked at her like she was looking at a demon now wished they could rush up and whip those corpses. "You're insane. That's insane." Old Master Qin was so angry that his beard was trembling. He said fiercely, "If the demonic mercenary group doesn't get rid of them, the heavens won't tolerate it. I think the demonic mercenary group must have received the news by now. At the very least, they must have sensed that something is wrong. We must rush back as fast as possible." Xiaoqing said calmly. She was afraid that if they went back late, Wu Buping, that scoundrel, would abscond with his people. At that time, it would be difficult to find him. "I'll take everyone back first. The rest of you can walk slowly." Qin Zishi, who had just returned from a mission, volunteered. His wolves and bears were the fastest means of transportation. Old Master Qin nodded. Then, regardless of his old body, he wanted to be the first to go back. However, after thinking about it, Xiaoqing was the first to agree. Firstly, Old Master Qin was the highest boss of the Qin family. It could be said that he had the highest authority in the Qin family. This matter involved a lot of things. Not only did it involve the demonic frenzy mercenary group, but also the people behind the demonic frenzy mercenary group. With Old Master Qin overseeing the Qin family, it would make people feel more at ease. Secondly, being with them was actually much safer than being with that group of metahumans. Xiaoqing was very worried that the demonic mercenary group would counterattack before their deaths and send people to intercept them. Therefore, the first group to go back was Xiaoqing, Air Dai, Yan Qiue, Qin Zishi, and Old Master Qin. Each of the 3 brothers of the wolf family carried an Air Dai, and Xiong also carried an Air Dai. She didn't need any mounts at all and ran faster than the wolves. He could even go to the front to pick a flower and then come back to give it to Xiaoqing. It was a kind of Air Dai romance. The journey was very smooth. They didn't meet anyone intercepting them all the way to the capital. When Xiaoqing and the others returned to the Qin family, they found out that Father Qin was very awesome. Although he didn't trust Xiaoqing very much, he trusted Old Master Qin very much. Therefore, when Old Master Qin brought people to help Xiaoqing, he sent people to monitor the demonic frenzy mercenary group. Just 2 days ago, the demonic frenzy mercenary group suddenly made a move. Father Qin didn't say anything and directly grounded the entire demonic frenzy mercenary group. At that time, Wu Buping found another powerful family in the capital, the Leaf family, to complain. The Leaf family was also very powerful, but they were still a little inferior to the Qin family, especially in terms of martial strength. The Leaf family sent people to question Father Qin why he imprisoned the demonic frenzy mercenary group. Father Qin didn't even meet them and didn't give a reason. He only said 2 words, "Wait." No matter how angry the Leaf family was, they didn't dare to vent their anger on Father Qin because in the capital, who didn't know that the Qin family was like firecrackers? They would explode at the slightest touch. Chapter 401. Moreover, they didn't give face to anyone. Their tempers were explosive, especially old Master Qin. Not many people dared to glare at him. If the Leaf family dared to say anything, the Qin family would really dare to barge in and beat them up. Even if the Leaf family was only slightly weaker than the Qin family, they didn't dare to provoke the Qin family. After all, no one wanted to provoke a bomb that might explode at any time, right? Especially Father Qin, who had a background in strength and wasn't afraid. On the other side, the smile on Wu Buping's face all year long had disappeared. His eyes were gloomy as he paced back and forth. After a while, a young man who looked similar to Guan Haishan walked in. This person was Guan Haishan's younger brother, Guan Hailong. He was also one of Wu Buping's right-hand men. As soon as Guan Hailong walked in, Wu Buping asked anxiously, "What did the Li family say?" Guan Hailong's eyes were also very gloomy. The Li family sent word that the Qin family can't handle this matter. They asked us to wait and not be anxious. Fuck them. Wu Buping was so angry that he kicked the table over. At that time, it was the Li family who asked them to cooperate. The Li family was the one who enjoyed the fruits of their labor. Now that something had happened, the Li family was the first to abandon them. After calming down a little, Wu Buping asked faintly, "Is Haishan back?" Guan Hailong shook his head and said, "No, and we're now locked up. We can't send news out, and news from the outside can't be sent in. No one knows what's going on now." Although they couldn't do anything before, they could still contact the Li family. Now, they couldn't even contact the Li family. Wu Buping wasn't worried about Guan Haishan. After all, Guan Haishan had an immortal body. He frowned and said, "In the worst-case scenario, our laboratory has been discovered. If that's the case, then we're really finished. As long as our laboratory is exposed, the Leaf family will definitely be the first to cut ties with us. In order to clear their names, they'll be the first to think of ways to silence us. If the laboratory wasn't discovered." He paused and sneered. "The Qin family wouldn't have locked us up. They were already at the end of the road." Guan Hailong whispered, "Big brother, what should we do?" "In a while, pass down the news and prepare to start Plan M. If the Li family is really so ruthless." A trace of madness flashed in Wu Buping's eyes. "Then even if I die, I will drag the entire capital down with me." Guan Hailong lowered his head with some trepidation, but his eyes were filled with madness and determination. "I understand, big brother." After Guan Hailong left, Wu Buping picked up a potion and looked at it calmly for a long time. Then, he slowly injected it into his body. He had always been a lunatic. On the afternoon of Shao Qing's return to the capital, the Qin family announced a piece of news regarding the demonic fury mercenary group's 10 major crimes. Ranked at the top was the construction of a living laboratory to research the zombie virus. As soon as this news was announced, the entire capital was in an uproar. Many ordinary people had been bullied by the demonic mercenary group, and there were also many ability users who couldn't stand the demonic mercenary group. However, they never thought that the demonic mercenary group would do such a crazy thing. The evidence was posted one photo after another. Those who had not seen the scene gritted their teeth and wanted to tear the demonic fury mercenary group apart alive. After the anger, there was lingering fear. Fortunately, the demonic fury mercenary group was discovered. Otherwise, what else would they do? Chapter 402. Who knew, they might be the next experimental subjects. Therefore, everyone in the capital supported the Qin family's decision to kill the entire demonic mercenary group. The head of the capital also gave the order to cooperate with the Qin family to carry out the operation. At the same time, the Li family and the major mercenary groups also participated in this operation. Of course, this killing didn't mean killing everyone in the demonic mercenary group. After all, not everyone was bad. There were definitely many low-level people who didn't know what the demonic mercenary group was doing. Therefore, the Qin family's decision was to kill the higher-ups of the demonic mercenary group. They would rather kill the wrong people than let them go. As for the middle and low-level people, they would first capture them and then slowly investigate. However, when they arrived at the demonic mercenary group's encampment, they saw corpses all over the ground. Moreover, they had mutated and zombified corpses with their stomachs cut open. Then, some of the still alive monsters who didn't know whether to call them humans or zombies rushed out of the house. Wu Booping held a tube of medicine and stood in the group of monsters with a faint smile on his face. Let the entire capital be buried with me. He opened the medicine in his hand. The moment the liquid inside came into contact with the air, it quickly evaporated and turned into a light green gas. Some of the ability users standing at the front suddenly felt that something was wrong. As he muttered, he scratched his itchy skin. Then, he screamed because he saw that he had scratched off a piece of flesh. He was stunned, but the people around him looked at him in horror. He lowered his head and saw that his fingernails were slowly growing, turning into a familiar grayish-black color. The skin on his hands also instantly spread a greenish-black color that symbolized death. It was very similar to the zombies he had killed countless times. He trembled as he touched his face. With a slight scratch, he scratched off a piece of flesh. The edges of the flesh were already rotten. No. Impossible. How could he become such a monster? The man's eyes were filled with despair. His hand trembled more and more. In the end, he pulled out a dagger and stabbed it into his heart. He would rather die than become a man-eating monster. There was more than one person who was infected. Those who were closer were all infected. The rest of the people retreated in horror from the green fog. They couldn't believe it. How could ability users be infected? If even paranormals were infected, then, the fear in everyone's heart was infinitely magnified. Xiao Qing coldly looked at Wu Booping, who was standing in the green fog and laughing arrogantly, and said coldly, "This should be a virus that they have successfully developed. Everyone, step back and don't get infected. Otherwise, even superpowered people will turn into zombies." Some of the infected people stood there in a daze, some knelt on the ground and cried, and some decisively ended their lives in despair. Xiao Qing frowned. She didn't know what to do because the green fog was still spreading. At this rate, it would probably cover the entire capital by tomorrow night. General Qin, in this situation, it's not good to have too many people. Please take everyone to disperse everyone in the capital. Let everyone go out of the city first. We'll move back after we've solved the virus, Xiao Qing said decisively. All right. Father Qin nodded and left with a group of people. Those who stayed were all experts, such as Wu Jiaojiao from Thorns and Roses, Zhu Mochen, and Jean Mingyue from Frost. Xiao Qing waved her hand. Gu Chuan stepped forward and tried to condense the water vapor in the air to freeze the green fog. He found that with his strength, he could only freeze a palm-sized area. However, the frozen area was still melting quickly. Chapter 403. Gu Chuan shook his head. His ice power couldn't deal with this strange virus. Wu Booping was slowly walking out. His face was full of malice. Even I can't control this virus. Give up. Even if I die, you'll die with me. Behind him, many babies crawled on the ground. Each of them had a part of their body that was zombified. They were all finished products or semi-finished products from previous experiments. Now, they were all released by him. Go! He said fiercely. Then, the babies jumped on him. Each of them bit his body angrily. He kept waving his hands, trying to get rid of the babies. He also made frightened sounds. Xiaoqing rolled up her sleeves and looked at him expressionlessly. What was the saying? Cleverness overcomes cleverness. Reap what you sow. Wu Booping had a lot of flesh bitten off, but it would slowly grow back. He had injected himself with the virus. Xiaoqing looked carefully. She felt that the babies couldn't kill Wu Booping in a short time. At this time, a little girl walked out of the green fog. She was wearing a loose hospital gown. She had a pair of big, innocent eyes. She appeared beside Wu Booping and slowly reached out her hand. Even if she stood on her tiptoes, she could only reach Wu Booping's chest. The girl frowned. Then, she put her hand into Wu Booping's body. She grabbed his heart and pulled. Wu Booping was so scared that he bent over. Finally, she twisted Wu Booping's neck happily. She tore off Wu Booping's head and held it in her hand. Then, she danced like she was holding a favorite toy. The babies who had eaten Wu Booping's body surrounded her and lay on the ground obediently. The people who saw this scene couldn't help but shudder, even if they hated Wu Booping. Xiaoqing knew very well that this girl was probably one of Wu Booping's experimental subjects. She was probably the only one who had succeeded in the legend. Wu Booping thought that he could control these experimental subjects, but in the end, he was bitten by them. However, what Xiaoqing and the others were most worried about was not the experimentals, but the drifting mist. It was constantly spreading like an infectious disease, dyeing the nearby mist green. The little girl opened her mouth and looked at Xiaoqing and the others with a gaze full of malice. She was like a hungry tiger that had been released from a cage, looking at everything with malice and greed. Xiaoqing took a deep breath and said calmly, "Although our biggest worry is this fog, the most important thing is to deal with these zombies. If they escape, the consequences will be unimaginable." But Wu Jiaojiao frowned. "There's no way for us to enter the fog. Maybe I can give it a try." Xiaoqing's confidence naturally came from her body. She was not a human being. Even if she turned into a zombie, to what extent could she turn into a zombie? She stretched out a vine and then slowly probed into the fog. On the surface, only one vine was probing into the fog, but Xiaoqing was secretly manipulating the vine to absorb the fog into her body along with the vine. To her surprise, the fog not only didn't cause any harm to her, but also turned into a special kind of energy the moment it entered her body. This special kind of energy changed her body while strengthening her superpower. In just a short while, Xiaoqing felt that she was about to break through a small level. Chapter 404. I'm a wood-powered paranormal. I have a plant that looks like a jellyfish. When it's released, it wraps me in the middle and isolates me from all the poisonous gas. Xiaoqing spouted nonsense with a straight face. "I want to try and see if I can isolate this kind of fog as well." "Be careful." Gu Pan Pan, who knew Xiaoqing well, said seriously. Xiaoqing deliberately stretched out her hand in front of everyone. She put her hand into the fog. After a long time, nothing happened. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief, looking at Xiaoqing's gaze as if they were looking at their savior. Xiaoqing continued to talk nonsense seriously. "With my current strength, I can only protect one person like me from this kind of fog. So, except for me and Air Dye, you all go out. Judging by the speed of the fog, the whole yard will be covered soon. You all wait for us outside." They looked at each other, nodded, and went out. Xiaoqing, who had fooled everyone, went into the fog with Air Dye. When she went in, she told Air Dye to see if he could absorb the fog to strengthen himself. Then, the two of them went in happily. The girl didn't expect that Xiaoqing could come in. She was planning to eat that person first. Xiaoqing and Air Dai came in. The girl let out a shrill roar, and the babies were the first to pounce on her. Actually, they were all innocent. Before they were born, their chance to live had been taken away by someone else, and they had been transformed into such monsters. But Xiaoqing had no choice but to kill them, because if she didn't kill them, more people would die in their hands in the future. Don't forget, these baby-like zombies can't control their desires, they can eat people. So, Xiaoqing and Air Dai didn't show any mercy when they attacked. These baby zombies were not weak. The weakest one was at the peak of level 3, and the strongest one was at level 4. However, they were useless in front of Xiaoqing. Soon, Xiaoqing and Air Dai killed more than half of them. The little girl zombie saw that the situation was not good, so she rushed over immediately. She was probably a paranormal when she was alive, and her power was strange. She could mist her body quickly. When she turned into a cloud of mist, her speed would become very fast. Then, she would condense into a solid body and appear in front of Xiaoqing. When she was fatally injured, she would turn into a cloud of mist again. In this way, Xiaoqing couldn't hurt her at all. Xiaoqing and the little girl zombie fought for a long time. When all the baby zombies were killed, they still couldn't defeat the little girl zombie. She wasn't as strong as Xiaoqing, but her power was too strange. Zombies had a strong recovery ability, so Xiaoqing couldn't do anything to her in a short time. Seeing that the fog had already spread out, Xiaoqing was a little anxious. She suddenly attacked, temporarily freezing the space around the little girl, and then attacked the little girl. She almost destroyed half of the little girl's body. The little girl became crazy. She suddenly turned into a cloud of red mist and rushed to Xiaoqing. The whole cloud of red mist had a sense of madness. Air Dai seemed to have found something. She quickly threw herself at Xiaoqing. Then, with a loud sound, the cloud of red mist exploded when it touched Air Dai. The power of the explosion was very strong. The little girl, who only had a small half of her body left, took the opportunity to run away. When the power of the explosion calmed down a little, Xiaoqing immediately stood up and held Air Dai in her arms. She eagerly checked Air Dai's body. Air Dai's back had no flesh at the moment. She could even see his spine and the internal organs inside. What was more terrible was that Air Dai didn't recover. If it was in the past, his wounds would definitely heal slowly. But this time, Xiaoqing checked for a long time, but the wounds didn't heal by themselves. Xiaoqing was so distressed. She didn't have time to absorb the mist. She found a piece of clothing from the space and wrapped it around Air Dai. Then, she ran out with Air Dai in her arms. She was so fast that the people waiting outside only felt a gust of wind in front of their eyes. Then, she disappeared. Xiaoqing only left a sentence, one escaped. In fact, it was killed. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 405. Xiaoqing didn't have time to say more. She hugged the Air Dai and ran back to her house. There was an indescribable fear in her heart. In the past, even if she or the Air Dai were injured, Xiaoqing didn't have this kind of feeling. Because they were zombies, unless it was a fatal injury like cutting off their heads, normal injuries would heal very quickly. But this time, the Air Dai didn't show any signs of healing. Xiaoqing was very scared. She was so scared that her heart was flustered. She was so scared that her legs went soft. She was so scared that her heart was in a mess. When she rushed home, Fu Jingmo was watering the flowers. When he saw Xiaoqing rushing in with the Air Dai, he was shocked. "Sister Qing, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Watch the door." Xiaoqing hugged the air dye and rushed upstairs expressionlessly. Probably because he was more relaxed after entering his own house, Fu Jingma accidentally saw the air dye's back that wasn't covered by clothes. It was a shocking sight. Fu Jingma was stunned. He stood there in a daze for a long time before he chuckled. There was an indescribable madness in his eyes. He was wondering how Fu Jingxin could be safe and sound and had only lost his memory. It turned out that Fu Jingxin was no longer human. He held the kettle in his hand. His eyes were filled with uncontrollable jealousy. Fu Jingxin, oh Fu Jingxin. When he was alive, he took everything from him. Now that he was dead, he still wanted to fight with him. He couldn't accept it. Why did all the good things belong to Fu Jingxin? Why did everyone like Fu Jingxin? Why did Fu Jingxin not have to do anything to get the things that he couldn't get no matter how much effort he put in? Why? He and Fu Jingxin had the same face, but Xiaoqing would rather like a zombie than look at him. Fu Jingma's eyes gradually turned from crazy jealousy to cold and bloodthirsty. A zombie. He wasn't even a human. What did he have to fight with him? Fu Jingxin, you should have died long ago. So this time, you should die quietly. Whatever you have, I will take over for you. Xiaoqing carried air dye to the second floor and carefully put him on the bed. She removed his coat, but the shocking wound still showed no signs of recovery. Xiaoqing observed carefully and discovered that his wounds were actually recovering. However, there was a special power that was destroying his wounds at the same time as they were recovering. Every time the wound healed a little, it would immediately be destroyed, so it looked like it hadn't healed at all. She was extremely anxious. When she turned around, she realized that Yan Qiue and the others were not back yet. She rushed out like a gust of wind and carried Yan Qiue back. Quick, take a look. What's wrong with him? Yan Qiue was carried so hard that he couldn't breathe. He wanted to joke with Xiaoqing with a bitter smile, but he saw the huge wound on air dye's back. He didn't like air dye very much. He was jealous that air dye had Xiaoqing's heart. Sometimes, he would secretly complain about him. However, he never thought of letting air dye die because Xiaoqing would be sad. Moreover, air dye loved Xiaoqing very much. He was willing to protect Xiaoqing with his life. Yan Qiue could see that. Therefore, even if he was crazy with jealousy, Yan Qiue didn't do anything to air dye. On the contrary, when he saw air dye's serious injury, his first reaction was to think about how to help air dye. After Xiaoqing told Yan Qiue about her discovery, Yan Qiue gritted his teeth and said, I need some time to do research because I'm not sure what the power in his wounds is. Xiaoqing nodded and said, just do your research. Air dye should be able to hold on for a while. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.